Chapter 1155. Xian Yin was indeed an abandoned pawn, but she was not simply an abandoned pawn. Her identity, or rather the identity of their team, was very special. They were the children of concubines from the great families of sky beyond heaven, not ordinary people. However, they were still children of concubines and were not valued in their families. Therefore, they were chosen to carry out this mission. There were too many uncertain factors in this mission, and it was too dangerous. Naturally, people of high status would not take the risk, but it was not reliable to leave it to ordinary people. They became the best candidates. They had many concerns in sky beyond heaven. Although they were children of concubines, they still had their own relatives and friends. Therefore, for the lives of these people, they must spare no effort to complete the mission. But they had to make sacrifices, at the cost of staying in this world forever. This was the pain in Xian Yin's heart. She did not want to be pierced by Tang Zhang's words. Her mood could be imagined. Seeing Xian Yin's reaction, Tang Zhang knew that he had guessed correctly. This could explain why there were no reinforcements to save her back to sky beyond heaven. She could only stay in this world. Many questions could be answered. She was on good terms with both sides. Not only did she have a good relationship with the Emperor of the Central Plains, but she also secretly supported New Era. No matter who sat on the world, she was the person with the highest power in the world. However, she was good at hiding, and most people did not know of her existence. "Tell me about this matter," Tang Zhang urged in an unquestionable tone. Xian Yin's expression changed. In the end, she had no choice but to tell the truth about being an abandoned pawn. When the others heard this, they suddenly understood, but they could not feel the slightest pity for her. Although there was a reason, her actions were really too hateful. "I don't have anything to hide anymore. You already know everything," Xian Yin said with a defeated expression. "Really?" Tang Zhang asked. Xian Yin said decisively, "Of course. If you don't believe me, you can kill me." Everyone looked at her without blinking. In the end, they believed her words. This matter was undoubtedly a pain in her heart. If even this point was dug out, there was nothing else to dig out. Suddenly, Tang Zhang changed the topic and asked, "Let me tell you a piece of unfortunate news. Some of the cultivators you banished to the outer sky have returned." Those few that were summoned back using the mountain river blood sacrifice array. Insignificant," Xian Yin said jokingly, not putting those people in her eyes at all. Tang Zhang was not surprised that she knew about the mountain and river blood sacrifice array. After all, she was a consecrator of the Azure Dragon Palace Hall. "But there's one thing you don't know. The ones that have been summoned back aren't the same few as before. Instead, all the demons have returned," Tang Zhang said. "What?" Xian Yin's expression changed drastically. Of course, she knew what kind of people the demons were. A few hundred years ago, not only did she have dealings with the righteous faction, she even had contact with the devil race. She was very clear on the strength of these people. Then perhaps this world would undergo a world-shaking change. How many people? At least several thousand. How is that possible? Xian Yin's expression became more and more serious. Only several thousand cultivators were banished back then. After so many years, how could there be several thousand survivors? In the past, the cultivators who were banished to the outer sky were used as sacrifices to strengthen the foundation of the outer sky. Now that so many of them had returned, didn't it mean that they weren't used as sacrifices to strengthen the foundation of the outer sky? Wouldn't the outer sky be in danger? What exactly happened to them in the outer sky? This matter was related to Xian Yin's mission. That was why she had such a big reaction. Hearing this, the others could guess the reason behind it and couldn't help but look at each other. How many cultivators are needed to strengthen the foundation of the outer sky? Tang Zheng asked with a grave expression. Xian Yin hesitated for a moment, then said, 80 to 80%. What? You mean to say that almost all the cultivators' lives are needed to strengthen the foundation of the outer sky? Tang Zheng was shocked, his voice raised a few octaves as he asked in a stern voice. The others were also shocked and looked at Xian Yin angrily, especially Tian Chanzi. His master was also among them. Didn't that mean that his master would have to be sacrificed as well? Tian Chanzi was so angry that he grabbed Xian Yin's clothes and roared, "Venomous woman, what a vicious heart. I'm going to kill you." Xian Yin once again succeeded in arousing the killing intent of another person. Xian Yin looked at Tian Chanzi indifferently, not saying a word. Tian Chanzi's anger couldn't be quelled, but he didn't really kill Xian Yin. Instead, he pushed her away. Xian Yin tidied up her clothes. Unfortunately, from the current situation, your plan didn't go as planned. Those cultivators didn't become sacrifices. Tang Jing shook his head and said sarcastically. Xian Yin sighed. This was where she was puzzled. She knew the strength of those cultivators very well. How could they survive in the outer sky? The strength of the outer sky was much higher than those cultivators. It was impossible that they couldn't catch them. Could it be that something unusual happened in the outer sky? She couldn't help but worry. Her mission was not completed. In the past, this was something she had always been proud of. Those who didn't think highly of her in the family would be very surprised and regretful after seeing her success. She enjoyed this feeling very much. But now she found out that it was all an illusion. She failed on the verge of success. Those people in the family would still look down on her. This frustration drove her crazy. Suddenly, she looked up to the sky and screamed, "Why is it like this? Why? Why didn't my efforts succeed? Impossible, it's impossible. You lied to me, didn't you?" Looking at her crazy appearance, which was completely different from before, Tang Jing didn't pity her at all. He said sarcastically, "Why would I lie to you? Why don't you ask them if I lied to you?" Xian Yin rolled her eyes and looked at the others. From their reactions, she immediately got the answer. What Tang Jing said was the truth. This made it even harder for her to accept. It was as if her spirit had been sucked away. All your efforts have gone to waste. So, you've completely failed. Tang Zheng said firmly. The word failed made her tremble. Her face was ashen. Next, tell me more about the situation in the outer sky. Who is the emperor you mentioned? How strong is he? What's the situation in the outer sky? Tang Zheng asked. This question could be asked to Qi Luna, but he didn't ask in a hurry. Qi Luna had been hiding for so many years. He might not know enough about the situation in the outer sky. Xian Yin was an insider of the enemy. Naturally, she had a deeper understanding of the situation. By comparing the information of both sides, she could have a clearer understanding. Tang Zheng used to hope to keep a distance from the outer sky. However, after the return of the demon race, he found out that the outer sky's foundation was unstable. In addition to Yan Qingyi's prophecy, he gradually realized that he would have to face the outer sky again in the future. Understanding the situation of the enemy now would do more good than harm in the future. Xian Yin turned a deaf ear to him. She was in a daze and didn't answer his question. Tang Jing frowned and stared at her. He asked, "Tell me everything you know." Xian Yin still didn't answer. "What should I do? Don't you know the soul search technique?" Tian Chanzi suggested. Tian Chanzi knew the side effects of the soul search technique. Therefore, he wanted to let Xian Yin have a taste of it. Xian Yin didn't respond when she heard the word soul search technique. Instead, she laughed like a crazy person. It was very strange. Ha ha ha, I'm so useless. I was useless in the outer sky, and I'm still useless now. Xianyin muttered to herself. He he he. I'm useless. I'm a useless person. She continued to talk. Hey, who are you? Are you here to laugh at me? What right do you have to laugh at me? Suddenly, she raised her head and stared at everyone. It was as if she had changed into another person. She didn't recognize anyone. What's wrong with her? Could it be that she was too shocked and lost her mind? Everyone had the same thought. Tang Zheng was also shocked. Was Xianyin unable to withstand such a blow? Was she crazy? Was she pretending to be crazy and lying? Tang Zheng sneered. I don't care if you're lying or not. I can use the soul search technique to find out what I want. He didn't want to use the soul search technique because Xianyin was very valuable. She might be useful when dealing with the demon clan. But now that she had lost her mind, there was no need to be merciful. Tang Zheng took a step forward and grabbed her. She looked at Tang Zheng with a silly smile and said, You also want to see me make a fool of myself, right? I won't let you get your way. Then, she hit Tang Zheng with her palm. Tang Zheng easily dodged and grabbed her head with his 5 fingers. He used the soul search technique. Suddenly, scenes appeared in his mind like a movie. His eyes lit up. This was the information he had been dreaming of. Suddenly, these images came to an abrupt end, as if someone had pulled out the power source. No matter how he channeled his power, it was to no avail. It was empty. How could this be? Tang Zheng stared at her in disbelief. The soul search technique had never failed. But this time, it didn't work. Even if he was very smart, he couldn't figure out the reason. What's wrong? The others saw Tang Zheng's reaction and quickly asked. Tang Zheng shook his head and said dejectedly, The soul search technique didn't work. I only got a little bit of information. How could this be? Everyone knew the power of the soul search technique. They had the same question as Tang Zheng. Heaven Monk thought for a moment, then said, The soul-searching technique is a spell of the demon clan. In fact, it is not that powerful in the demon clan. Back then, she had a close relationship with the demon clan. Could it be that she knew the method to break it, so she instinctively resisted it? Is that possible? Tang Zheng asked the Empyrean Fairy. The Empyrean Fairy thought for a moment and nodded. It's not impossible. Chapter 1156. Since Xianyin was able to resist the soul-searching spell, he could not get enough information from her mind. However, Tang Zheng was able to deduce one thing from the fragmented information that he had obtained. She did not tell the truth and hid too much crucial information. Of course, she was not lying. She did tell a lot of things that were true. One of the key points was that they came to this world for more than one purpose. Not only did they come to this world to expel the cultivators and strengthen the foundation of the realm beyond Avalon, they had another purpose that no one knew about. However, the soul-searching spell had lost its effect and he could not find any relevant information. The others looked at him and then at the crazy Xianyin. They asked, What do we do now? Since she is useless, let's kill her. Tian Chanzi said with a murderous look. Red Lunar agreed immediately, Yes, let's kill her. Looking at the people who wanted to kill Xianyin, Tang Zheng expressed his concern. She did not tell us everything earlier and hid a lot of crucial information. I found out that she came to this world for more than one purpose. She has another purpose that no one knows about. What? Another purpose? Everyone was shocked and stared at Xianyin with burning eyes. They felt that it was inconceivable. She was hiding something when the knife was on her neck and playing tricks. She was really not an ordinary person. What purpose? Empyrean Fairy asked coldly. She had to admit that she had underestimated Xianyin. Tang Jing shook his head in disappointment. I did not find anything either. The soul-searching spell lost its effect too quickly. I only managed to gather a little information. When everyone heard this, they revealed looks of disappointment. They looked at each other in dismay, but in the end, they looked at Tang Jing, clearly waiting for him to make the decision. Tang Jing pondered for a while and said, I think we should not kill her for now. She is an important clue. No matter if she is really crazy or just pretending to be crazy, if we did not kill her, we might have a chance to get more information about the realm beyond Avalon from her mind. What do you think? The others looked at each other and hesitated. Many of them wanted to kill Xianyin as she was a ticking time bomb. What if she exploded in the future? In addition, she deserved it. She had harmed so many people in the past. Even death could not wipe out her crimes. However, some people also agreed with Tang Zhang's words. If they stayed, they might have unexpected gains in the future. This was a crossroad, and it was difficult to make a choice. Tian Chanzi and Empyrean Fairy looked at each other. Although Tian Chanzi insisted on killing Xianyin, he also understood that Tang Zhang's words were not without reason. In the end, he compromised and said, You decide for yourself. The elders and the others also said, Lord Envoy, we will listen to you. Red Moon wanted to object, but when it looked at Xiao Bai, it swallowed its words. I'll spare her life, but I won't let her harm others. I'll take her into Sumera world. The Sumera heavens was different from ordinary Sumera pouches. It could contain life forms. If Xianyin was trapped within the Sumera heavens, she wouldn't be able to cause any big waves. Tang Zhang waved his hand and the Sumera heavens flashed. Xianyin disappeared and was taken into the Sumera heavens. Although Red Moon was unwilling, it didn't dare to say anything. Tang Zhang's gaze turned to the Scarlet Moon Beast and said, Why don't you tell me what you know about the sky beyond heaven? Just now, Red Moon and Xianyin had only mentioned a little. The more detailed information was, the more curious it would be. Tell me, tell me. Xiao Bai urged impatiently. Red Moon nodded its head and started to tell him everything. The realm beyond heaven had a long history. It was not inferior to this world. As for the structure of the world, it was very different from this world. It was a world where only the strong were respected. It was more cruel and bloody. The realm beyond heaven was a paradise for cultivators. However, not everyone was a cultivator. Just like this world, there were ordinary people too. There were many races in the realm beyond heaven. However, the two largest races were the beasts and the humans. The beasts were united and powerful while the humans were cunning. In the beginning, the beasts ruled the realm beyond heaven for tens of thousands of years. Generations after generations, the power of the realm beyond heaven became stronger and stronger. Although the humans were ruled by the beasts, they lived in peace and contentment. This was especially so for the ordinary humans. These humans were not cultivators but ordinary people. When the beasts ruled the world, there were many human generals who held high positions under them. Later on, one of the humans had a rebellious heart. He secretly contacted the humans who had ulterior motives. In the end, when the former king was unprepared, he severely injured him and started a rebellion. Since then, an earth-shattering war broke out between the two sides. There were countless casualties and blood flowed like rivers. The beasts were hunted down one by one while the humans rose to power. In the end, the former king was defeated and fled. The traitor ascended the throne and continued to chase after us. In order to cover our escape, the former king forcefully opened a spatial door. However, he did not escape. The realm beyond heaven was his territory. Even if he died in battle, he would die on this land. In the end, he covered his queen and escaped into the spatial door. After fighting for more than 10 days, he could not withstand the continuous attacks and died. When the crowd heard this magnificent history, although they did not witness it with their own eyes, they were still shocked. They were amazed by the extraordinary history of the realm beyond heaven. There were all kinds of strange things in this world. In this world, there were beasts who cultivated, but they were not strong enough. They had always been ruled by the humans. Who would have thought that the realm beyond heaven was ruled by the beasts for tens of thousands of years? It was unbelievable. Everyone could not help but look at Xiao Bai. Its ancestor ruled the realm beyond heaven for so many years. It was amazing. As a descendant of the imperial family, Xiao Bai was naturally extraordinary. It was no wonder that no one could recognize its origin. When it faced the five-clawed golden dragon, although its strength was not as strong as the five-clawed golden dragon, it was not afraid at all. The pride that came from its bones was moving and awe-inspiring. The Scarlet Moon Beast looked at Xiao Bai deeply. Its eyes were filled with respect. Then, the Scarlet Moon Beast continued. After the humans took over the realm beyond heaven, they killed off the elites of the beasts and enslaved the weaker beasts. Many people thought that after the humans were united, all of the humans would rise. However, it was just wishful thinking. The weak humans did not rise. In fact, their living environment was worse than before. The law of the jungle, where the strong ruled, was used to its fullest. Many ordinary people were trampled on by the strong cultivators. Their lives were treated like grass, and no one was there to uphold justice. The realm beyond heaven was in a mess. Under the oppressive policies of the humans, everyone kept quiet and did not dare to resist. There was only one way out for them to resist, and that was death. Some kind-hearted people stood up to resist and tried to uphold justice. However, they were all killed by His Majesty. After that, this trend was completely extinguished. The crowd looked at each other, and their expressions became unnatural. They thought that it was shocking enough that the beasts ruled the world. Now that the humans had risen, they felt ashamed that the humans behaved in such a despicable manner. The Scarlet Moon Beast glanced at the crowd and said, "In the realm beyond heaven, those traitorous humans are truly shameless. Not only did they kill the beasts, but they also did not spare their own kind. Anyone who dared to resist them would only end up dead." The crowd remained silent. As humans, they knew that the humans were scheming and deceitful. They even knew their shortcomings and cruelty. They did not think that the Scarlet Moon Beast was exaggerating. Although the humans in this world had been promoting their good side, where there was light, there would be darkness. This was unavoidable. They did not deny that there were many problems in the humans. Seeing that the crowd did not react, the Scarlet Moon Beast seemed to be surprised. These people were very different from the humans that it knew. It did not fly into a rage, nor did it scold them loudly. The Scarlet Moon Beast took a deep breath and digested this unusual scene. It continued, "The beasts have been hiding everywhere, and it's very difficult for them to survive. In fact, many people are looking forward to Your Majesty's return to the realm beyond heaven and lead us to fight back. We'll defeat that incapable emperor and take back everything that belongs to us." The Scarlet Moon Beast was excited. Its eyes were shining as it stared at Xiao Bai. Although Xiao Bai heard what it said, its reaction was very calm. Perhaps it was not wise enough to understand such complicated and profound things. Gratitude, hatred, love, and the world were too far away for it. It was like a child listening to the Scarlet Moon Beast talk about these things as if it was listening to a fairy tale. Looking at Xiao Bai's reaction, the Scarlet Moon Beast could not help but feel sad. It could not hide its disappointment. Xiao Bai was its only hope, but it reacted in such a manner. Although it respected Xiao Bai very much, it was still sad. Looking at Xiao Bai's innocent look, Tang Jing asked the Scarlet Moon Beast, "Are you really confident?" The Scarlet Moon Beast nodded heavily without hesitation. Of course, I'm confident. Although your majesty is still young, it's the inheritor of the imperial bloodline. Once your majesty awakens in the future, you'll have unprecedented power. That traitor will definitely be defeated. Although Tang Zheng was very close to Xiao Bai, he was not as optimistic as the Scarlet Moon Beast. Although he did not know much about the realm beyond heaven, he could tell that the traitor was very powerful from the Scarlet Moon Beast's description. Even the late emperor was no match for it. He was chased off the throne and was hunted down like a stray dog. How could a weak Xiao Bai be a match for that traitor? Perhaps it was the Scarlet Moon Beast's wishful thinking. Tang Zheng did not say these words out loud as he did not want to dampen the Scarlet Moon Beast's enthusiasm. The Empyrean Fairy and Tian Chanzi shared the same opinion as Tang Zheng. They had lived for many years and were very knowledgeable. They knew better than anyone else how difficult it was to rule an entire world. In the long history of this world, there were only a few people who could do it. Moreover, there were many powerhouses in the realm beyond heaven. The situation was completely different. Back then, I encountered the space door by chance. I knew it was fate that allowed me to meet your majesty and fight our way back to the realm beyond heaven. We'll take back the glory that belongs to us. The Scarlet Moon Beast was very emotional as it talked non-stop. P.S. Once again, please follow my official WeChat account, Tang Xiao. Just search for this account on WeChat. I'll post exclusive content and updates on my official account every day. Thank you. Chapter 1157. Little White looked at the excited Scarlet Lunar Beast and poured a bucket of cold water over its head, saying, I will not go to the sky beyond heaven. How can that place be better than here? I only want to stay by Master's side forever. The Red Lunar Beast's heart sank. It was as if he had fallen from the sky into a bottomless abyss. He tried his best to persuade, Your Majesty, this is your mission. As a member of the royal family, this is your career. Little White curled its lips. It did not put the so-called mission and career in its eyes. It shook its head and wagged its tail as it walked to Tang Zheng's feet, rubbed against his leg, and lightly jumped onto Tang Zheng's shoulder. Red Lunar Beast was stunned. He thought that he was about to succeed, but he did not expect this to happen. This was like a person who was walking in the desert and saw a water source when he was on the verge of death. When he finally got closer, he realized that it was just a mirage. Tang Zheng could understand Red Lunar Beast. As for the great career that he described, Tang Zheng did not agree. He advised, don't be too hasty. We can discuss this in the future. Red Lunar Beast hesitated for a long time. In the end, he had no choice but to accept this reality. He nodded as if he had nothing left to live for. His enthusiasm disappeared in an instant. He looked at Tang Zheng with a complicated gaze. What kind of magic did this person have to make His Majesty follow him so wholeheartedly? He was a human. How could His Majesty follow a human? If Wang Quan knew about this, he would not be able to rest in peace. But now that he was under the roof, he could not voice out his grievances. He could only keep it in his stomach. Woo woo, little Yu suddenly cried out a few times. She went to Red Lunar Beast's feet and rubbed her little head against him. Red Lunar Beast's depressed expression suddenly changed into a gentle and loving look. He reached out his claws and gently stroked Yu's head. He said, Good child, I have made you suffer in the past. I will make it up to you in the future. Little Yu understood his words. Her eyes became lively and light. What about my business? The five-clawed golden dragon finally spoke with dissatisfaction. Not only did the five-clawed golden dragon hate the Scarlet Lunar Beast, but it also hated Xian Yin. Now that it couldn't do anything to these two opponents, its mood was extremely low. Tang Zheng looked at it calmly and asked, do you have any objections to my arrangement? Of course I do. What's the point of keeping these guys alive? They are all scourges. The five-clawed golden dragon said indignantly. Hee hee, it seems that you want to make a decision for me. Tang Jing chuckled. The five-clawed golden dragon's heartstrings trembled as it looked at Tang Jing with a complicated expression. It had been branded with a soul mark, so if it dared to resist Tang Jing, it would only experience how the word death was written. Come back. Tang Jing stretched out his arm. The five-clawed golden dragon had no choice but to wave its tail. With a flash of golden light, it turned back into a tattoo and disappeared from Tang Jing's arm. Now that the crimson lunar beast had escaped, many of his questions had been answered. Everyone had witnessed everything with their own eyes and felt that this trip was worth it. The situation in the capital city was unpredictable. Tang Jing did not stay for long. Instead, he brought a group of people back to the capital city through the teleportation portal. However, there was an additional crimson lunar beast with them. The two crimson lunar beasts, one big and one small, walked in the backyard of the villa. The crimson lunar beast wagged its tail and looked around curiously. Back then, when it came to this world through the teleportation portal, it had been sealed in a crystal. After it was discovered by the Swedish royal family, it had been hiding in the underground laboratory. It was dark and knew very little about the outside world. Therefore, when it saw the true face of this world, it could not help but widen its eyes. It was like Granny Lou who had just entered the Grand View Garden. Especially the skyscrapers and all kinds of technological products, it was too much for its eyes to take in. The Outland was similar to the ancient Huaxia, so there were no technological products. It was indeed an eye-opener for the Crimson Lunar Beast. Comparing it with the hometown in its memory, it could not help but become more curious about this world. Don't go too far. Otherwise, if you are seen by strangers, it will cause unnecessary trouble. Tang Jing reminded it. The Crimson Lunar Beast was not in a hurry to leave and see the wonders of this world. Instead, it followed Tang Jing and said, I have something to talk to you about. Tang Jing frowned as he looked at it and nodded thoughtfully, come with me. Xiao Bai rode on little Yu Yu and ran away. The two little fellows went to play happily. Even if the sky fell, it was a small matter to them. The others either went back to their rooms or gathered in groups of 3 or 5 to discuss what they had seen and heard today. The Crimson Lunar Beast followed Tang Jing to his room. It looked at him and said, I want to know about Her Majesty. The Crimson Lunar Beast did not know many things about Xiao Bai. It did not even know about the Queen's situation after she came to this world. Naturally, it could not help but be curious. Tang Jing looked at it indifferently. He did not hide anything and told it everything he knew. The Crimson Lunar Beast was surprised and said, You are saying that the Queen became the holy beast of the sorcerer tribe. Later on, by chance, you and Her Majesty formed an unbreakable bond. You have summed it up well. Tang Jing said. How did the Queen become the holy beast of the sorcerer tribe? This part of history is too long ago. I can't do anything about it. Tang Jing shrugged. Perhaps only Tian Chanzi could explain this matter. The Crimson Lunar Beast could not hide its disappointment and said, the Queen was wronged. She had to become the holy beast. It was an insult to the Queen. The Crimson Lunar Beast was very angry about being called a holy beast. Although it was called a holy beast, it was still under the rule of humans. How could it be compared to the status of a holy beast? It must be the humans who threatened the Queen. At that time, Her Majesty was in the Queen's stomach. It was just like how Xianin threatened my wife. The Crimson Lunar Beast guessed angrily. Tang Jing laughed and said, What happened back then, other than the people involved, no one can say for sure. I know that you are biased against humans, but we are different. We are not your enemies. Moreover, it is our credit that you were able to escape and see the light of day again. I know. That is why I am very grateful that you saved me. I am even more grateful that you saved Her Majesty. You don't have to thank me for the matter between me and Xiao Bai. My relationship with it is not something you can understand. It is like my family, a part of this family. I should do anything for it. You don't have to thank me. Tang Zhang said simply. The Crimson Lunar Beast looked at Tang Zhang with a complicated expression. In the end, it nodded and said, I know. But I want to ask you for a favor. I want to teach Her Majesty personally. Please approve. No. Tang Zhang rejected without thinking. Why? The Crimson Lunar Beast stared at him. I know your intentions. You want to instill hatred into it, but since it's my family, I have to be responsible for it. Although it's quite powerful and has an extraordinary identity, it's still a child. It shouldn't have come into contact with hatred. This is its destiny. The Crimson Lunar Beast insisted. Hee, that is just your wishful thinking. What destiny? It is all a lie. Its destiny should be decided by itself. It should not be decided by others. Do you understand? Tang Zhang's eyes flashed as he said aggressively. The Crimson Lunar Beast's eyes were flickering. It stared at Tang Zhang as if it was trying to find a flaw in him. However, in the end, it had to give up on this idea. There was no turning back. Tang Zhang had made up his mind. Indeed, he had already made up his mind. The enmity between the country and the family was a matter of the previous generation. It was a passing cloud. First and foremost, Little White was his family. Then, she was the so-called descendant of the Heavens Beyond Heaven's imperial family. He could only wait for it to grow up and make its own decision. Then, everything would be logical. Whether it chose to return to the Heavens Beyond Heaven for revenge or to stay in this world, Tang Zhang would support it without hesitation. He would be its strongest support. If it went back, even if Tang Zhang was not strong enough, he would not back down. However, if it did not want to go back, no matter who it was, whether it was the Crimson Lunar Beast or someone else, Tang Zhang would not sit back and do nothing. You are very smart and should be able to understand what I mean. Also, it was not easy for you to be united with your son. You should first enjoy this kind of life and not have any other messy thoughts. What do you think? Their eyes met. The Crimson Lunar Beast did not dare to look into Tang Zhang's eyes. In the end, it said bitterly, I understand. However, it did not give up on its original idea. Although I can't teach His Majesty openly, you can't stop me from interacting with His Majesty. His Majesty will understand the responsibility and destiny on his shoulders. The Crimson Lunar Beast thought quietly. Seeing that the Crimson Lunar Beast had left, Tang Zhang leaned against the back of the chair and closed his eyes. He rubbed his temples and immersed his mind into Sumera heaven. Xian Yin was still crazy. There was no change. He shook his head helplessly. I didn't expect the Heavens Beyond Heaven to be such a world. Back then, many people went to the Heavens Beyond Heaven from the peak of Mount Buzhou. However, they did not send back any clues or news. Now, you have coincidentally found out about the Heavens Beyond Heaven. The inner demon suddenly said. Tang Zhang smiled faintly and said, maybe this is the right time. Now, it seems that there must be a space door at the peak of Mount Buzhou that can connect the two worlds. When the 100 Faces star crashed into Mount Buzhou, it seemed like he was venting his anger and made many people angry. Now, it seems that he really did a good thing. Otherwise, the Heavens Beyond Heaven would have contacted our world long ago. The 100 Faces star had delayed all of this for tens of thousands of years. The inner demon sighed. He could not help but sigh when he recalled the events that happened long ago. It's a pity that regardless of the significance of the 100 Change Star Sovereign's actions back then, he has sacrificed so many lives to summon back the demon clan. His sins far outweigh his merits, so in the end, he and we are not the same kind of people. Tang Zheng was filled with righteous indignation and said unquestionably. The inner demons did not question his words. After pondering for a while, they said, "Don't blame me for not reminding you. There is one thing that you must do right now." Chapter 1159. Xiao Xiaoling was not afraid of death. He found the real culprit. Even if there was a mountain of knives and a sea of fire, he would cross it. DT. His hand holding the sword did not tremble at all. It was as firm as his heart. Song Yu's eyes flashed with a cold light. Xiao Xiaoling's words poked at his sore spot. Killing the sword god was one of his biggest secrets, and no one else knew about it. Of course, he did not think that Xiao Xiaoling knew about it. However, this accusation made him involuntarily think of his own crimes. Xiao Xiaoling really did not know that Song Yu killed the sword god. His so-called deceiving the sword god referred to him killing Sword Shersan, which was told to him by Tang Zheng. In addition, Xiao Xiaoling would never believe that the sword god would pass the sword pavilion to him. There must be something fishy about it. Song Yu certainly did not know this, but he was also a little flustered in his heart. He was afraid that his numerous crimes would be known by the world. Of course, he wanted to kill Xiao Xiaoling. His eyes flashed with killing intent, and he said coldly, "How long can I hold on?" "Kill him." The sword slave's attack suddenly became sharper and sharper. The sword light filled the sky and shrouded Xiao Xiaoling from all directions. Whoosh! Suddenly, Xiao Xiaoling made his move. The sword light fell from the sky, as if a red sun had fallen from the Milky Way above the ninth heaven. It was even more dazzling than the light cast from the sky. It exuded a terrifying aura. Ninth Heaven Galaxy Fall Sword Technique. Xiao Xiaoling's face finally had a trace of fluctuation. This sword technique was the sword god's consummate skill. He did not expect that it would fall on Song Yu, a deceiving fellow. This was an insult to the sword god. Xiao Xiaoling's heart was filled with anger, and his eyes turned blood red. He stared at Song Yu hatefully and said, "You are tarnishing the Ninth Heaven Galaxy Fall Sword Technique." Song Yu sneered and said, "Tarnishing it? I'm bringing glory to Master. In my hands, this sword technique will explode with even greater power and shine even more brilliantly." Shameless! Xiao Xiaoling roared hysterically, but to no avail. He could only watch the light fall. Xiao Xiaoling did not sit still and wait for death. The soft sword in his hand shook, like a snake spitting out its tongue, nimbly and craftily welcomed Song Yu's sword. Both of their sword techniques were inherited from the sword god. Although they were different sword techniques, they were similar in many ways. But in terms of power, the Ninth Heaven Galaxy Fall Sword technique was undoubtedly superior. With a crisp sound, Xiao Xiaoling's sword completed the shape of a full moon, as if it was about to break. He gritted his teeth, and the arm holding the sword trembled slightly. However, he did not give up and roared. Clang! The soft sword bounced back like an arrow shot from an iron bow. Song Yu was the arrow that bounced back. However, Song Yu did not fall out completely. Instead, she rose into the air and suspended high above Xiao Xiaoling. After a few seconds, the sword in her hand lit up again. Ninth Heaven Galaxy Fall. This sword was even more powerful, as if it was exuding the aura of death. Xiao Xiaoling's eyelids twitched, but he also urged all his power to resist with his sword. Kacha! The soft sword broke. Song Yu's arm moved, and the sharp sword drove straight in, from top to bottom, piercing his shoulder and almost piercing his heart. Blood immediately came out. This scene made his heart sway. This was the essence of the Ninth Heaven Galaxy Fall Sword technique. They had seen the sword god perform it before. Now that they saw this scene again, they were shocked. Song Yu was also very satisfied with her sword. Since he escaped from the sword pavilion, he had been practicing the Ninth Heaven Galaxy Fall Sword technique hard. His talent and perception in the way of the sword were really good. Otherwise, he would not have been accepted as a disciple by the sword god. He finally understood the essence of the Ninth Heaven Galaxy Fall Sword technique little by little, and his sword technique advanced by leaps and bounds. The sword technique created by the sword god was not too complicated, but there were many subtle things in it. Unless one had excellent talent, it was absolutely impossible to really learn the essence of it by hard work. Xiaoling's life was at stake. Song Yu's mouth revealed a victorious smile and said, "You are just an abandoned disciple of the sword pavilion. What qualifications do you have to challenge me? Go to hell." With a shake of his arm, the long sword changed direction, and the tip of the sword pierced Xiaoling's heart. The long sword was originally pierced in Xiaoling's shoulder. With this slight change in direction, even Xiaoling could not save himself. Everyone thought that Xiaoling was going to die. The expression in the eyes of the sword slave also changed a lot. Perhaps some people still had some small thoughts in their hearts, but this scene completely cut off those small thoughts. "Master, this disciple is useless. I was unable to eradicate this scum of the sect." Xiaoling was desperate, his face was ashen. He had died once. He was stabbed in the heart by Tang Zheng. Later, Tang Zheng tried his best to save him, gave him a second chance to live, and let him pledge allegiance to him. "Tang Zheng, I failed to complete the task you gave me. I will return this life to you." He almost closed his eyes. Suddenly a bright light shone in his eyes. This bright light was incomparably bright. It was the sword light. He was very familiar with it and would never mistake it. The sword light arrived in the blink of an eye. He had never had such a fast sword. It was even faster than his master's sword. His heart suddenly jumped. He suddenly noticed a familiar aura. This sword light was too familiar. He would never forget it. Because this was Tang Zhang's sword light. Song Yu also abruptly raised his head, noticing this sword light. It was not good. This thought immediately came to his mind, but the sword in his hand did not stop for half a moment. But it was still a step too late. The sword light fiercely chopped his sword. Puff! The long sword was pulled out from Xiaoling's shoulder and flew out. Song Yu flew away with the long sword. The power of this sword was so great that Song Yu's arm kept trembling. He was aghast. The sword in his hand was suspended above Xiaoling's head. War Soul Sword. He recognized it at a glance. It was all too familiar to him. His pupils suddenly shrank as he looked into the distance. Sure enough, a familiar figure came walking on the wind, passed through the sword slave's encirclement, and landed beside Xiaoling. "Are you okay?" Tang Zheng looked at Xiaoling's wound and asked. Xiaoling's desperate heart was rekindled with the fire of hope. He said, "I won't die." He was an assassin. His fatality was far more tenacious than ordinary people. This kind of injury would not kill him. Tang Zheng nodded and said, "Well done. You finally found Song Yu." After Song Yu escaped from the sword pavilion, it was like a clay ox entering the sea. He was more secretive than Granny Li and Lord Ji Wuxiang. It was as if he had evaporated from the world. Tang Zheng also did not place too much attention on Song Yu, but after all, he was a big worry in his heart, a potential dangerous factor. How could he allow him to grow stronger? Therefore, when this task was given to Xiaoling, he was just trying it out. Unexpectedly, Xiaoling completed it very well. It didn't take much time for Song Yu to surface. It was just that this place made him very curious. How could the two sides meet here at the Tree of Life? Song Yu's eyelids twitched wildly, and he was on guard. He was really frightened by this person, but ever since he comprehended the essence of the Nine Heavens Milky Way fall sword technique, his former confidence had returned. Therefore, at this moment, although his heart was beating like a drum, he did not run away. Song Yu, you really hid well. I worked hard and let Xiao Xiaoling take action to find you. Tang Jing said lightly, with a smile that was not a smile. Song Yu's heart was a little creepy. He forced himself to be spirited, coldly snorted, and said unceremoniously, "It turns out that this abandoned disciple of the Sword Pavilion surrendered to you. No wonder he was expelled from the sect by Master. He was born with a rebellious bone behind his head. He was an ungrateful wretch who recognized a thief as his father. Xiao Xiaoling, you are the one who has tarnished Master and the Sword Pavilion. You are talking nonsense." Xiao Xiaoling's heart seemed to have been poked with countless holes, and blood flowed. Song Yu was proud. His eloquence was much better than Xiao Xiaoling's. 10 Xiao Xiaolings could not speak against him. Xiao Xiaoling's chest heaved up and down. He was flustered and exasperated, and the blood from his wound flowed faster. Calm down. You are an assassin. How can you be angered by these few words? Tang Zheng said unhappily. His fingers quickly pointed at his wound a few times, and the gurgling blood stopped. Your mission has been completed. Let me do the rest. After Tang Jing finished speaking, he couldn't help but remember the scene when he first saw him. At that time, he met Song Yu for the first time in Ordinary Balance's courtyard. At that time, he was an ordinary high school student, unremarkable. Song Yu was the young master of the Song family. He was the focus of attention and honor. One was on the ground, the other was in the sky. There was a world of difference. In the eyes of many people, perhaps Tang Jing could not reach the level of Song Yu even if he worked hard for a lifetime. Because no one had ever had such an unrealistic and absurd idea. Only a few years had passed. Now that the two sides were facing each other again, everything was reversed. The Song family was already old history. Although Song Yu had incorporated the Sword Pavilion, he was still a stray dog. Tang Zheng had become a new star in the eyes of everyone. No one dared to underestimate him. The word, not what it used to be, could not be more appropriate. Song Yu also thought of these scenes. He couldn't help but feel bitter in his heart. The corner of his mouth twitched a few times as he stared at Tang Zheng. At this time, the sound of footsteps gradually approached. Tian Chanzi, Yi Dingdang, and Fang Shishir also caught up. The sword slaves naturally could not stop them. Heaven Monk brought the two of them in as if he had entered a place with no one around, and strolled in leisurely. Tian Chanzi was not surprised. In his eyes, Song Yu was a small character that couldn't be any smaller. He couldn't arouse his interest at all. Yi Dingdang was different. She couldn't believe it and exclaimed, "Why is it you?" She had a deep relationship with Song Yu and had almost become his fiancé. If she hadn't pushed out Tang Jing as a shield and the subsequent unexpected events, who knew what would have happened? Song Yu sneered at Dingdang. His eyes were burning with a raging fire. The fall of the Song family was ultimately related to Yi Dingdang. She was one of the main culprits. Yi Dingdang, it's actually you. Song Yu gnashed his teeth. Chapter 1160. Song Yu and Yi Dingdang stared at each other, their eyes clashing in midair. Yi Dingdang did not have the slightest good impression of Song Yu. When they first met, it was like this, later on, and now it was also like this. Yi Dingdang, you woman, you ruined my family. I will definitely kill you. Song Yu said fiercely. Yi Ding-dang snorted disapprovingly and said, "You keep saying that I am the one who harmed you, but you really know how to quibble. It is clear that you brought this upon yourself. If you did not insist on going against Tang Zheng and even tried to harm him, how could you have fallen to this state today?" With Song Yu's paranoid personality, how could she listen to these words? She heavily growled and said, "It's just flowery words." Tang Zheng could not bear to watch any longer and said, "Ding-dang, don't lower yourself to his level. This person has already gone completely crazy and lives in his own world. Other than himself, everyone else is his enemy." After failing, he did not find the reason for his failure and instead blamed it on others. He is a complete loser. What large family's young master, that is just a layer of beautiful outer clothing that can be torn apart with a single tear. Yi Ding-dang nodded. She looked at Tang Zheng with eyes full of tenderness and sweetness. Because, from Song Yu's situation, Tang Zheng's excellence and extraordinariness were even more apparent. "Tang Zheng, you don't have the qualifications to make irresponsible remarks to me." Song Yu shouted at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng remained unmoved. He looked at the other sword slaves and said, "You are really blind to listen to him. You must know that Jian Shisan died at the hands of his Song family. Do you also want to follow in his footsteps?" Xiao Xiaoling had already said these words, so the sword slaves were indifferent. Tang Zheng shook his head. He didn't have any methods to deal with this group of stubborn sword servants, yet he didn't care. In the past, perhaps sword servants were a force that couldn't be underestimated. But now, the strength of sword servants was too low, and they wouldn't be of much use in future confrontations or battles. Seeing this, Song Yu sneered, "Tang Zheng, you still want to bewitch my people. Don't waste your energy." Tang Zheng smiled, then changed the topic and asked, "Song Yu, why did you bring so many people here?" "Yes, he must have a plan. I have tracked them all the way here. He must be thinking of something bad." Xiao Zhao's heart moved, and he quickly said. Tang Zheng nodded his head. He also found this suspicious point, which was why he asked this question. A trace of unnaturalness flashed across Song Yu's face. She laughed and deliberately covered it up. "Ha ha ha, why should I tell you about my affairs?" Tang Zheng raised his head and glanced at the tree of life that was close at hand. His voice became dignified as he said, "You came for it, right?" Song Yu's eyes jumped a few times, and she said, "I don't know what you are talking about. The tree of life may be mysterious to ordinary people, and they don't know its magical aspects. But for the young master of the Song family, I'm afraid this won't be difficult for you. Of course, you know the extraordinary aspects of the tree of life." Tang Zheng sighed. Song Yu's face stiffened. She thought that her purpose was very hidden, but it was still exposed by Tang Zheng's words. Song Yu's purpose for coming here was indeed not simple. She had heard the sword god mention the extraordinary aspects of the tree of life. After all, ever since the tree of life appeared, the Azure Dragon Hall had never stopped investigating and collecting information about it. The leader of the dragon group, Xing Feng's research on the tree of life seemed to be hidden, but it did not escape the Azure Dragon Hall's intelligence system. The sword god had once mentioned the tree of life by chance, and Song Yu had secretly remembered it, but she had never had the chance to study it in detail. Later on, after she came out of the sword world, she focused on increasing her cultivation. Apart from comprehending the Nine Heavens Galaxy Fall sword art, she finally found another shortcut, and that was the tree of life. It was said that the sap of the tree of life was like nectar. Not only could it prolong one's life, but it could also rapidly increase one's cultivation. Back then, Xing Feng had thought of this. However, it was ruined by Tang Zheng and he even paid with his life, failing on the verge of success. Song Yu understood that if she wanted to become strong enough to defeat Tang Zheng, this was the only path she could take. Moreover, the tree of life had always been unguarded, so it was the best time for her to make a move. He led the sword slaves to the front of the Tree of Life, but was blocked by an invisible array. Before, he had never been here, so he didn't know much about the Tree of Life and its surroundings. Now, looking at the Tree of Life in front of him, he couldn't do anything about it. He was really angry and anxious. But before he could think of a way to break it, Xiao Xiaoling chased him all the way. At this moment, seeing Tang Zheng and the others rushing over, although Song Yu's heart was in a mess, she didn't show it. Instead, she was calm and composed, as if victory was in her grasp. This was to stabilize the morale of the army. Otherwise, the sword slaves would have scattered and fled. He understood that this time he was one step slower. Tang Zheng might have gotten the information about Xiao Xiaoling, so he chased after him. Suddenly, he looked at Xiao Xiaoling with a murderous gaze. He really regretted that he didn't have time to kill him. He didn't know that Tang Zheng didn't come here because of Xiao Xiaoling. All this was just a coincidence. Heaven's will. Looking at Song Yu's reaction, Tang Zheng knew that he had guessed right. If it weren't for the inner demons reminding him, he wouldn't have been able to save Xiao Xiaoling, let alone stop the other party's actions. Although he was very confident in his array, it was not a good thing to be coveted by Song Yu. In case something went wrong and the Tree of Life was bad, then it would be too late for him to regret it. Song Yu, no matter what your goal is, let me tell you, it's just an illusion, a beautiful wish of yours. Last time I let you escape, but this time you have no way to escape. Tang Zheng said with a murderous look. Song Yu's heart jumped. This was a boundless desert, a flat expanse of land that stretched as far as the eye could see. There was simply no place to hide, so naturally, there was also no place to escape. Don't be too confident. You think you can cover the sky with one hand? Song Yu retorted. Her face was cold. She waved her hand and ordered, "Kill them." The sword slaves roared and waved their swords. The sword light reflected a dazzling light and flew towards several people. I'll meet them. Yi Dingdang was eager to give it a try. She jumped up to meet them. I'll come too. Fang Shishir was ready to move. With a whoosh, she rushed into the battle. Their cultivation was higher than these sword slaves. They hadn't fought for a long time. Their fighting spirit had long been restless. Now that they could finally satisfy their cravings, how could they miss this great opportunity? Tang Zheng wasn't worried about the two. His eyes were firmly locked on Song Yu. Song Yu hid behind the sword slaves. Separated by the crowd, she and Tang Zheng looked at each other. She could clearly see the ridicule in Tang Zheng's eyes. Whoosh! Song Yu turned around and fled. She didn't hesitate at all. She was faster than a rabbit. Tang Zheng was stunned for a moment. He never imagined that Song Yu would be so straightforward. She didn't even try to be perfunctory and fled just like that. He couldn't help but admire the other party's shamelessness, as this was really his style. Just like back then, when he bewitched others to snipe Tang Zheng, he brought a group of trusted aides and escaped without a trace. This time, she didn't even want her confidants. In order to survive, she left first. However, this time wasn't like the last time. Tang Zheng didn't even see her figure, so she was able to escape. This time, she was right under his nose. If he still allowed her to escape, then Tang Zheng wouldn't be able to show her face anymore. Whoosh! Tang Zheng flew up and stepped on the heads of a few sword slaves. Like a bird, he lightly flew through the crowd and descended behind Song Yu. Song Yu's speed was extremely fast, and when he heard the movement behind him, he was so scared that his heart trembled. He turned his head to look, only to discover that Tang Zheng was right behind him. He was so scared that his whole body trembled, and the long sword in his hand swung towards Tang Zheng. If you had the strength of the sword god, then you might have a chance. But you're too weak. Although you've cultivated the ninth heaven Milky Way fall sword art, you're still unable to withstand a single blow. Tang Zheng said in disdain. The sword god was a martial king. Even now, he wasn't a match for Tang Jing, let alone Song Yu. The sword fell from the sky. It was like a scorching sun. It shone with the sunlight, making people's eyes hurt. However, Tang Jing didn't close his eyes. There wasn't even the slightest fluctuation in his gaze. He coldly looked at the sword. Clang! Suddenly, the sword stopped. The scorching sword light was like a fire being extinguished. It immediately dimmed. Song Yu looked at the scene in front of him in disbelief. The sword was still in his hand, but it was difficult for it to move forward. Two fingers appeared in front of him, firmly holding the sword. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move it in the slightest. Impossible, how can your skills be so powerful? Song Yu shook her head fiercely. It was as if she had seen a ghost. She couldn't stop chattering. He hadn't seen Tang Zheng for a long time. He didn't have an intelligence system, so he naturally didn't know that Tang Zheng's skills had improved so quickly. So when he saw Tang Zheng fight again, it was like a completely different person. This blow couldn't be said to be not serious. It almost caused the self-confidence that he had built up with great difficulty to collapse. Tang Jing smiled faintly. He looked at him as if he was looking at a clown and said, Song Yu, since you escaped once, why didn't you hide properly? Instead, you came out to stir up trouble. This is courting death. You can't blame others. You really want to kill me. At this point, you're still asking such an idiotic question. Don't you think you're too retarded? Tang Zheng said sarcastically. Song Yu's face flushed red. With a loud roar, she used all her skills and finally broke free from Tang Zheng's fingers. Her sword trembled, and sword flowers scattered down. They were like small suns that surrounded Tang Zheng. Shwa shwa shwa. Tang Zheng's expression didn't change. The War Soul sword appeared out of thin air. As the sword light flashed, all the small suns exploded. With a kacha, the War Soul sword slashed onto Song Yu's sword. The sword broke into two pieces. The War Soul sword stopped at Song Yu's heart. Song Yu's body stiffened. She was dumbstruck. Chapter 1161. Wait a minute. Seeing that Tang Jing was going to kill Song Yu, Xiao Xiao covered his wound and stumbled over. Tang Jing turned his head and asked, Why, do you still want to protect him? Xiao Xiao coldly shook his head, Of course not. People like him can only blame themselves for dying 1,000 times. It's just that I want to know about Master. Master must have told me before he died. I want to hear from him. What qualifications does an abandoned disciple like you have to mention Master? Song Yu clamored. Xiao Zhao's face became unnatural, and he said, Sword Pavilion will always be my sect, and Master will always be my closest person. No matter what you do, you can't change this. Tell me, what is Master's last words? Song Yu snorted coldly, and the corner of his mouth gently twitched. A strange look flashed across his face, and he said resolutely, I won't tell you. Tang Zheng had been staring at Song Yu closely. Seeing his reaction, his heart moved, and he said, Song Yu, if you don't want to suffer before you die, then you'd better tell me honestly. Dream on. Song Yu did not shrink back. Do you really want to know? Tang Zheng ignored him and asked Xiao Xiao coldly. Xiao Xiao nodded heavily, I couldn't see Master for the last time, so I want to listen to his last words. Well, as you wish. Tang Zheng promised. Song Yu sneered and said in his heart, If I don't open my mouth, how can you know? The sword god's last regrets naturally couldn't be known to the other side, then he would be exposed. Seeing Tang Zhang's calm look and confident appearance, Song Yu disdainfully asked, "If I don't say, you won't know." "Really? I have a way." The magical power of a cultivator is often beyond your imagination. No matter how deep you hide, I have a way to know. Tang Zhang's mouth evoked a mysterious smile. Song Yu suddenly had an ominous premonition, and his heart thumped. Seeing Tang Zhang's big hand grabbing his head, he exclaimed and cried out, "Wait a minute. What, you want to say it yourself again?" Tang Zhang asked. Song Yu hesitated, and finally nodded and said, "Yes, I'll tell you." "What did Master say?" "Master imparted the 9 heavens Milky Way false sword art to me, and also passed down the sword pavilion to me, allowing me to lead the sword pavilion to greater heights." "Impossible." Xiao immediately shook to deny it. "Why is it impossible?" Song Yu's heart was beating like a drum. "Although I was expelled from the sword pavilion, I know Master very well. He absolutely can't pass the sword pavilion to you. The 7 kills is still there, and it's not your turn at all." Xiao said firmly and solemnly. Song Yu's face became unnatural, and he said disapprovingly, "You are an abandoned disciple of the sword pavilion, what do you know? How can you guess Master's foresight? These are Master's last words, you can believe it or not." Xiao still shook his head, "I will never believe your nonsense." Song Yu's lie was exposed, but he still said without changing his face, "These are the true last words of Master. You don't believe it because you are an abandoned disciple of the sword pavilion. No, you are lying." Xiao's mood became excited. Tang Zhang said calmly, "Whether it is true or not, we will know after testing it." "What are you going to do?" Song Yu's face suddenly changed, and he stared at Tang Zhang and asked. "I said that there are many magical powers that you don't understand, such as the soul-searching technique." When his voice fell, Tang Zhang's big hand fell on Song Yu's head. Song Yu tried to struggle, but it was no use. "Ah!" He screamed in agony as if his brain was being torn apart. Stop, I'm telling the truth." Too late. Tang Zhang was not interested in Song Yu's little tricks. Whether he really wanted to tell the truth or deceive, he didn't care. The soul-searching technique could test all his words. The shouting stopped abruptly, as if the close button was suddenly pressed. He was dumbstruck, and his eyes had completely lost their light. Tang Zhang's expression changed. He was surprised by the information obtained by the soul-searching technique. Finally, his eyes were firmly fixed on Song Yu's face. This handsome face was myopic and dull. However, the crimes committed by the other party made Tang Zhang feel cold. Finally, Tang Zhang let go of his hand. Song Yu still did not respond, as if his soul had been taken away, and he was like a walking corpse. "How is it?" Xiao saw the situation and quickly asked. Tang Zhang let out a long sigh and said, "You are right, he did hide the truth from you." Xiao was relieved. With an expression of, "I knew it was like this," he asked curiously, "What is the truth?" At this time, Yi Dingdang and Fang Shishir joined forces. With the help of Tian Chanzi, they had also suppressed the sword slaves. One by one, the sword slaves fell to the ground, wailing. They did not kill them. Therefore, although these sword slaves cried out fiercely, in fact, their lives were not in danger. When the sword slaves saw that Song Yu had become a fool and did not respond, they all understood that the situation was hopeless. They also lost the thought of resistance. Several people who were stubbornly resisting also threw down their weapons, looking depressed. Almost everyone heard the conversation between Song Yu and Xiao. Seeing Tang Zhang mention the word truth, everyone's attention was attracted. "What is the truth?" Yi Dingdang also asked. Tang Zhang looked at them deeply and said, "The truth is that the sword god did not pass it to him, but to Qi Sha. Xiao Xiao suddenly realized and said indignantly, I knew it was like this. How could Master pass it to him? The Ninth Heaven Galaxy Fall Sword technique was definitely not passed to him by Master, right? Tang Jing nodded, yes. Xiao Xiao gritted his teeth and stared fiercely at the group of sword slaves. He said indignantly, as people of the Sword Pavilion, do you understand what the truth is? This person actually tampered with the last words of the Sword God and took the Sword Pavilion for himself. This is the real deceiving the Master and destroying the ancestors. Xiao Xiao was very excited and his saliva splashed everywhere. Suddenly, he looked up at the sky and said with sadness and joy, Master, are you in heaven? The truth is finally out. I haven't finished yet. Xiao Xiao's action made Tang Jing say again. Xiao Xiao was startled and asked thoughtfully, does he have any other unknown crimes? Tang Jing nodded, you guessed right, but this matter is too shocking. You have to be mentally prepared. He already knew that Xiao Xiao had deep feelings for the Sword Pavilion and the Sword God. Although Xiao Xiao had died once and surrendered to Tang Jing, his feelings for the Sword God had not weakened in the slightest. Xiao Xiao said carelessly, don't worry, I haven't seen anything in these years. You can say it, I'm fine. The Sword God was also killed by Song Yu. Tang Jing hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he said the shocking truth. Xiao Xiao seemed to have been cast a spell on him and instantly became sluggish. His mouth was wide open, almost enough to stuff a big steamed bun in. The other sword slaves were also stunned. They looked at each other in dismay. Then, all eyes focused on Song Yu, but he didn't react at all. Saliva flowed out from the corner of his mouth, but he didn't know. The Sword God was killed by Song Yu. This sentence echoed in everyone's mind. Although this sentence came from Tang Jing's mouth, which was equivalent to coming from the mouth of the enemy, the sword slaves didn't doubt it and immediately agreed with this sentence. The sword slaves were not stupid. From Song Yu's usual words and actions, they could see that he was a decisive and ruthless person. If it was someone else who did such a heartless thing, perhaps some people would doubt it. But if it was Song Yu who did it, their first reaction was not to doubt, but to believe. Tian Chanzi sighed and said, this kind of person who deceives his master and destroys his ancestors is a scourge in the world. Kill him. Yi Dingdang said with deep sympathy, yes, kill him. This kind of person doesn't deserve to live in this world. She never dreamed that she would almost marry such a person. If she really succeeded, it would be a nightmare for her life. As Tian Chanzi's disciple, Fang Shishir naturally didn't hesitate to say, how can there be such a person in the world? Killing Master, is he still human? Of course, Song Yu was a human, but he was worse than a pig or a dog. People had many bad habits, but they must have at least moral values. Song Yu's values had completely collapsed, and there was no bottom line at all. This kind of person could no longer be called a human, but a walking corpse. You, killed. Master. Xiao Xiao trembled all over. He walked step by step towards Song Yu, and even his voice was trembling. His face had undergone a huge change. Many complex expressions merged together, entanglement, pain, anger, and so on. As long as one looked at it, one could feel the feeling in his heart at this moment. Song Yu's mouth was drooling. He stared blankly at Xiao Xiao, and suddenly grinned. Did you kill Master? Xiao Xiao trembled even more fiercely, and asked fiercely. Heh, kill. Song Yu began to chuckle stutteringly. Although the word kill was vague, it could still be heard clearly. It was like a fuse that ignited the powder keg that had been accumulating for a long time. I'm going to kill you and avenge Master. Xiao Xiao still held a broken sword in his hand. When his voice fell, the broken sword was sent out. Puff! The broken sword pierced Song Yu's chest. Song Yu's whole body was stiff, and he screamed in a heart-wrenching voice. But no one thought that he was pitiful. This was what he deserved. Kill you, kill you. After Xiao Xiao's sword hit him, he didn't stop. He crazily shot out his palms. Bang! Song Yu flew out and fell heavily to the ground. He spat out blood and kept twitching. The broken sword was still inserted in his chest, like a nail, nailing him to the column of shame. Bang! A pair of knees heavily knelt on the ground. Xiao Xiao looked up to the sky and screamed. He cried bitterly and shouted, "Master, I finally avenged you and cleaned up the sect. This kind of person who killed his master, I want to cut him into pieces. Only then can I pay tribute to the spirit of Master and his fellow disciples in heaven." The sound of crying resounded through the world, making those who heard it feel sad. Heaven and earth could testify that Xiao Xiaoling's feelings for the Sword Pavilion and the Sword God were probably the strongest in the Sword Pavilion, but after all, he was an abandoned disciple who was expelled from the sect. If it was the Sword God, he would probably sigh. The sword slave stared blankly at the scene. Many people sadly wiped their tears. Perhaps Sword God was not a good enough leader, but the swordsmanship they learned was, after all, passed down from Sword God. This master's kindness could never be erased. The trace of kindness in many people's hearts was also aroused. Their expressions were gloomy. Some people lay on the ground and sobbed in a low voice. They followed Song Yu, which was equivalent to betraying Sword Pavilion and Sword God. This blow was really not light. Tang Zhang and the others looked at each other in dismay, but they didn't sigh. Although Sword God was an enemy, he had cultivated a disciple like Xiao Xiao Xiao. Perhaps it was also his proudest thing, which made people respect him. Of course, no one was perfect. Sword God's eyes would be blinded by villains. He actually accepted a disciple like Song Yu, which eventually led to a fatal disaster. Chapter 1162. Song Yu lay straight on the ground and finished his life. The others were immersed in complex emotions. The sword slaves knelt on the ground, their faces ashen. They were very clear about what was waiting for them. Death. Although the sword slaves were the elites of the sword, they were not afraid of death. Xiao Xiaoling wiped away his tears, stood up, and walked to the front of Song Yu, looking down at his corpse. Song Yu's eyes were wide open, but he had lost his vitality. Xiao Xiaoling really wanted to tear Song Yu into pieces, but seeing that he was dead, this idea disappeared. "You are worse than a beast, but I am not. Since you are dead, then Master's revenge will be avenged," Xiao Xiaoling said coldly. Tang Zhang looked at Xiao Xiaoling with relief. He didn't completely lose himself because of hatred, which made him appreciate it very much. How do we deal with these people? Yi Dingdang also put away her emotions, pointed to the sword slave and asked. The sword slave looked at Tang Jing nervously, his eyes full of pleading. Tang Jing didn't pay attention to it at all, but looked at Xiao Xiaoling. Xiao Xiaoling turned his head and looked at Tang Jing. He said, "Young Master Tang, can I ask you a presumptuous request?" "What's the matter?" Xiao Xiaoling looked at the sword slave deeply and said, "I hope young Master Tang will let them live. Although these people helped the tyrant and are with Song Yu, they are swordsmen after all. I don't want my hands to be stained with the blood of my fellow disciples." These words were full of sincere feelings. Tang Jing couldn't help but look at Xiao Xiaoling with admiration. In the past, he was a killer who killed without blinking. Unexpectedly, he had such a kind side. This was completely different from his original image, which was amazing. Tang Jing didn't express his opinion, but asked, "But they just wanted to kill you?" "That's because of Song Yu's bewitchment. Now that Song Yu is dead, let's put an end to everything." Tang Jing secretly nodded, and finally glanced at the sword slave whose eyes were full of expectation and pleading. He said, "You have a big life, and Xiao Xiaoling is pleading for you. Otherwise, I will not let you go just because you are helping the tyrant and are in cahoots with Song Yu." The sword servant was overjoyed at the unexpected good news as he continuously bowed to Tang Jing in thanks. "You don't have to thank me. The one who should be thanked is him." Tang Jing pointed to Xiao Xiaoling and said. The sword slaves thanked Xiao Xiao one after another. They couldn't see the situation of life and death just now. "Xiao Xiaoling, you are the disciple of the sword god. Naturally, you don't want the inheritance of the sword to be interrupted. So, I suggest you lead these people to rebuild the sword." Tang Jing finished speaking. His big hand pulled Song Yu's body through the air. With a whoosh, a sword manual flew into his hand. On it were the words, "Ninth Heaven Galaxy Fall." This is the Ninth Heaven Galaxy Fall sword technique. It is the heart and soul of the sword god. I hope it will be carried forward in your hands. Tang Jing threw the sword manual into Xiao Xiaoling's hand. He caught the sword manual in a daze, at a loss. Of course, he understood the importance of this sword manual. "Don't waste my efforts," Tang Jing warned. "But Xiao Xiaoling subconsciously wanted to refuse. After all, he used to be a sword disciple. If he held the sword, it would definitely cause others to criticize him. Pedantic. Tang Jing sighed and winked at the sword slave. There were many shrewd people among the sword slaves. They actually understood Tang Jing's meaning. They bowed to Xiao Xiaoling and shouted, "Please hold the sword." The other servants also woke up from a dream and bowed down, "Please hold the sword." Xiao Xiaoling couldn't understand Tang Jing's intentions. He looked at him gratefully. His mood fluctuated. He couldn't help but be deeply impressed by Tang Jing. In the past, he surrendered to Tang Jing because of his own promise, not out of sincerity. But from this moment onwards, his attitude towards Tang Jing underwent a 180-degree change, as he sincerely pledged his allegiance to him. "Thank you." He bowed deeply towards Tang Jing and said to the sword slaves kneeling on the ground, "All of you, get up." Boom. "Thank you. The sword's breath will continue in the hands of Xiao Xiaoling." Boom. Suddenly, a loud noise woke everyone up. Everyone was shocked and hurriedly looked up, only to see a hole torn in the sky. No. This was not a hole in the sky. This was a hole in the 6 directions 8 desolation array that guarded the Tree of Life. At first, the 6 directions 8 desolation array was taught to Tang Jing by Tian Chanzi. Then, he personally set up the array and activated it. He had been guarding the Tree of Life without any mistakes. In his impression, the 6 directions 8 desolation array had a strong enough defense. However, the scene in front of him told him that nothing in the world was absolute. The 6 directions 8 desolation array was broken. Who attacked the 6 directions 8 desolation array? Tian Chanzi also reacted. He looked as if he was facing a great enemy. He shouted, "Who is it?" Whoosh! Whoosh! In the sky, a figure came in the blink of an eye and stopped steadily above the Tree of Life. Ripples appeared around the Tree of Life, flowing with light and color, and then it collapsed little by little. Bang! Bang! The ground made a series of explosions, sand and dust were everywhere, and a white light was exposed from the ground. Heaven and Earth Obsidian. Tang Jing's pupils shrank. He naturally recognized it. After the 6 directions 8 desolation array was broken, the Heaven and Earth Obsidian was also exposed. They're here for the Heaven and Earth Obsidian. Tang Jing had an idea and immediately saw through the other party's motive. He raised his head and stared at the group of people in the sky. As expected, he found a familiar figure in the crowd. The demon race's Saint King. What, it's the demon race's people? When the others heard these words, they immediately realized the danger. They were guarding against Chiyu, who had designs on the heaven and earth obsidian, so they came from far away. They didn't expect the demon race to move so quickly and follow them closely. If it wasn't for the inner demon's warning, the demon race would have been the first to get it. Tang Jing rejoiced and reminded loudly, "They're here for the heaven and earth obsidian. Everyone, be careful. This group of people is very strong. Don't underestimate them." When the sword slaves saw this group of demon race flying in the sky, they were stunned. Many of them were scared, pale and trembling. Tang Jing glanced at the sword slave and said, "Xiao Xiaoling, you take them away." "No." Xiao Xiaoling froze for a moment, and then flatly refused. "There are enemies, of course we have to fight together. If you don't want the Sword Empress to die, then listen to me and take them away." Tang Zhang said unquestionably. Most of the sword slaves were innate realm martial artists. Compared with the demon race's cultivators, their strength was really too low. They couldn't play much of a role at all. It was better to save their lives than to die. Xiao Xiaoling naturally understood Tang Zhang's intentions, but he really couldn't do something like running away. "What are you still standing there for? Go!" Tang Jing scolded angrily. Xiao Xiaoling hesitated for a moment, looked at the demon race in the sky, stomped his feet and said, "Go." After saying that, he led the sword slaves and turned to leave. From time to time, some people looked back, but when they saw the high and mighty demon race in the sky, their heartstrings trembled and their faces turned pale. Tang Zheng looked at Yi Dingdang and Fang Shishir and said, "I know you won't go." Yi Dingdang and Fang Shishir looked at each other, showing a proud expression, and said, "You are smart. We are facing difficulties together, how can we run away? But the sword has no eyes, the other party is still a vicious and merciless demon race. You must be careful." Tang Jing still did not forget to remind them. In the sky, Saint King looked at the people below, his eyes flashing. As for those sword slaves who left, he didn't put them in his heart. This is really as the ancestor said. If we were a step later, Tang Jing would definitely beat us to it, and it would not be easy to get the heaven and earth Xian stone. Of course, my days in this boy's body are not in vain. Chi Yu's voice sounded. He did not say that even if Tang Jing did not think of this, there was still the inner demons, and he had to be on guard. The inner demons were not only powerful, their spells were extraordinary, but also resourceful. Otherwise, it was impossible to fight with him and the Yellow Emperor for so many years. Chiyu had been stored in the treasure box, and was inseparable from Saint King. This operation was his proposal, of course, he would accompany them all the way. The demon race had been looking for a suitable parasite for him, but the people of the island nation were all dead. Even those corpses could not meet the requirements of Chiyu, so he could not be reborn in the island nation. Helpless, they could only secretly return to Huaxia. With Chiyu in the middle, the demon race was not wiped out like last time. Instead, they quietly sneaked into Huaxia, and then secretly arrived at their destination. Of course, the demon race that returned to Huaxia this time was only a portion. The majority of the demon race's troops remained in the island nation, and built their own headquarters. Island nation was an overseas land. No matter what Huaxia did, it would not be easy. This could effectively protect their strength. This was also Chiyu's decision after careful consideration. He did not return to Huaxia in a large scale. He understood that Huaxia today was not the Huaxia of tens of thousands of years ago. The government was not completely powerless, and the power of technology was not to be underestimated. Ancestor, then what should we do now? Of course we should snatch the heaven and earth obsidian. Most of the heaven and earth obsidian is buried here. If it falls into our hands, then Tang Jing will not be able to rebuild the stairway to heaven. Naturally, we will be able to block the group of people from sky beyond heaven. Chi Yu said solemnly. He indeed thought of the same thing as the inner demons. Old people were shrewd, not to mention people at the level of Chi Yu and the inner demons. Their foresight was unique, and when they took one step, they saw 10 steps ahead. They were completely incomparable to ordinary people. Saint King said wholeheartedly, "Ancestors' words are reasonable. As long as we block the people from sky beyond heaven, then we have nothing to worry about. This world is ours. Back then, the Yellow Emperor took this great land from our hands, and now we will take it back." Chapter 1163. Saint King waved his hand and ordered, "Attack, take back the heaven and earth Xian stone." So, a large group of demon elites moved, descending from the sky and pouncing towards the heaven and earth Xian stone below the Tree of Life. "Move!" Tang Jing growled. Without any fancy moves, he rushed towards the heaven and earth Xian stone like lightning. The heaven and earth Xian stone was scattered around the Tree of Life. Now that it was completely exposed, it was sparkling and translucent, attracting everyone's attention. Seeing that a demon was about to get close to the heaven and earth Xian stone, Tang Zhang's head moved, and the war soul sword flew out from his hand, and with a puchi sound, it slashed onto that person's arm. Blood splattered everywhere. That person screamed miserably and fell down. Tang Jing grabbed with his hand, using the sky-swallowing technique. A black hole immediately appeared in his palm, and the sound of wind whistling could be heard. A few pieces of heaven and earth Xian stone were sucked into his palm, and with a flash of Sumra heaven, the heaven and earth Xian stone fell into Sumra heaven. Even though Tang Jing had the sky-swallowing technique, there was nothing he could do. Because the heaven and earth Xian stone was too scattered, and the distance was too far. There were even many behind the gigantic Tree of Life, blocked by the gigantic tree trunk, and the sky-swallowing technique was useless. Tian Chanzi also moved. He and Tang Jing parted ways, one in front and one behind. He went around the back of the Tree of Life. After repelling a few demons, he took the heaven and earth Xian stone for himself. There were a total of 66 heaven and earth Xian stone buried here, and he and Tang Zhang had only taken back a few pieces. The demon elites had all arrived under the tree, all kinds of treasures lit up, and the originally cool Tree of Life also exploded with a dazzling light. Fang Shishir and Yi Dingdang were also fighting head-on with the demon clan. Their strength was not bad, and they were actually not at a disadvantage. This was because they knew that they lacked battle experience, so they cooperated with each other and had a tacit understanding. Tang Jing repelled a few more demon clan S. His strength was not inferior to the ordinary elites of the demon clan S, and he was not at a disadvantage at all. In addition, he used the Taiji Yin-Yang sword technique, causing a few demon clan S to fall under his sword. "Let's stop here." Suddenly, a voice exploded above his head. He didn't need to raise his head to know who it was. Saint King. Tang Zhang's whole body tensed up, and he became extremely alert. The long sword in his hand trembled, and with a swoosh, 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 swoosh. He didn't even look at it. Just by feeling, the power of this sword couldn't be underestimated. Humph. Petty tricks. Saint King snorted in disdain. Light blossomed from his hand, and the heaven-opening axe flew out of his hand, chopping down from the sky. Tang Zhang's Tai Chi Yin-Yang sword technique was exquisite beyond compare. The heaven-splitting axe appeared to be very clumsy, but with one strike of strength, it was able to defeat 10, and it chopped down on the War Soul sword. Boom! With a loud sound, Tang Zhang's feet sank into the ground, his arms trembled non-stop, and the War Soul sword flew out of his hands. Cracks appeared on the ground as if there was an earthquake. Mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. Tang Zheng had once blocked Saint King's attack. That time, he used the holy armor shield to defend. Although he was injured and was sent flying, it was much easier than this time. It was obvious that the strength of Saint King's attack this time was very terrifying. However, he didn't know that Saint King had let Tang Zheng escape last time, and was fiercely reprimanded by Qi Yu. Therefore, he hated Tang Zheng. Although he knew that Tian Chanzi's cultivation was higher, he still came to deal with Tang Zheng without hesitation. Tang Zheng clenched his teeth so tightly that they were trembling. The War Soul sword flew away, and he hurriedly summoned the holy armor shield. When the heaven-opening axe was about to hit his body, the holy armor shield blocked the attack. With a boom, the holy armor shield trembled violently. Tang Zheng's arm went numb, but in the end, he still held on. However, half of his body was almost sunk into the soil, and he was in a sorry state. He was overwhelmed with shock. The difference in strength between him and Saint King was too great. Suddenly, from the corner of his eyes, he saw that a few demon clans had already snatched away a few heaven and earth black stones. He immediately bared his teeth and roared. No matter how loud his roar was, it couldn't change this reality. Those few heaven and earth black stones were snatched away by the demon clan. It wouldn't be easy to snatch them back. This was equivalent to the loss of the last method to restrain the demon clan. The strong sense of defeat completely ignited Tang Zheng's anger, and he roared towards the sky. The heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrow appeared in his hands at the same time. He drew the bow and sword and shot towards Saint King. Saint King had always been on guard against the shooting sun arrow. The last time he almost suffered a great loss from the shooting sun arrow, it was still fresh in his memory. Furthermore, even the soul of the golden crow was shot down by the shooting sun arrow. How could he underestimate it? Seeing the flash of the arrow, Saint King's mind moved, and the heaven-opening axe descended once again. Boom! When the arrow and axe collided, it was like a bomb exploding, and the shockwave spread out in all directions. At the same time, Tang Zheng channeled his power, and with a leap, he soared into the sky from the soil, escaping from his predicament. Saint King also flew backwards. This time, Tang Zheng used all his strength to attack, causing Saint King to feel threatened. He was actually also in the semi-god realm, but he was only at the 7th stage of the semi-god realm. One had to know that in the sky beyond heaven, he was an expert in the Mahayana realm. However, after passing through the space gate, his power was weakened. This was a common phenomenon. When returning from the sky beyond heaven through the space gate, one's power would be weakened to varying degrees. However, after a period of time, one's power would slowly recover. Therefore, this wouldn't have much of an impact. Saint King could see at a glance that Tang Zheng's cultivation had increased from the last time, reaching the semi-god realm. This was beyond his imagination, and it made him understand that this person was extraordinary. If he didn't get rid of him, he would become a big problem in the future. Therefore, although his attack didn't have any effect, his body flipped in mid-air, and the heaven-opening axe in his hand grew bigger again, until it was almost the same as his height. Tang Zheng, this is just the appetizer, the main course has just begun. Saint King said with a murderous look. Whoosh! The heaven-opening axe left the air, and with a whistling sound, it attacked Tang Zheng fiercely. Tang Zheng's pupils suddenly shrank, and he shouted, "Shooting sun arrow!" Whoosh! The shooting sun arrow shot out from his hand again. The shooting sun arrow was connected to his mind, and with lightning speed, it once again collided with the heaven-opening axe head-on. Thunder exploded. Tang Zheng was sent flying. Saint King retreated a few steps, but stabilized his body. His cultivation was much higher than Tang Zheng's, and furthermore, the heaven-opening axe was also a sacred weapon. Although it was slightly inferior to the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrow, it was still not to be underestimated. Tang Jing fiercely smashed into the trunk of the Tree of Life, creating a large crater in the trunk, and juice splattered everywhere. It had to be known that back then, Xing Feng had used professional equipment to chisel open the trunk of the Tree of Life, but Tang Jing had actually smashed a large crater in the trunk. If not for the fact that he had cultivated the primal chaos Vidra spell and his body's toughness far exceeded that of ordinary people, just this attack alone would have been enough to make him suffer. Cough cough. Tang Jing coughed violently, blood flowing out from the corner of his mouth. He was in a sorry state. However, his eyes were still full of spirit. He was not prepared to retreat, although he knew that he was at a disadvantage in this battle. He could only continue to fight. If he retreated, then even more heaven and earth profound stone would fall into the hands of the demon clan. He had already seen more than 10 pieces of heaven and earth profound stone fall into the hands of the demon clan. If this continued, then there would really be nothing he could do. Although Fang Shishir and Yi Dingdang had a tacit understanding of each other, they were still weak. Under a series of swift and fierce attacks, the disadvantage of the two gradually became apparent. Seeing that, Tang Jing roared, his palm felt wet, and immediately understood that he had touched the sap of the Tree of Life. The sap of the Tree of Life was like a nectar, containing a powerful energy. Back then, Xing Feng had spent a lot of effort to take out a small bottle, and in the end, it fell into Tang Jing's hands. He glanced at the tree trunk beside him, and the sap quickly flowed down. Tang Jing grabbed the sap with his big hand, and poured it into his mouth. Immediately, a powerful energy exploded in his throat, and then flowed through his 8 extraordinary meridians, limbs and bones. Tang Jing felt as if his body was about to explode, and was filled with energy again. With a roar, he shot out from the tree trunk like a cannonball, directly pouncing towards Yi Dingdang and Fang Shishir. With a wave of his hand, the War Soul sword that had landed in the distance flew back into his hand. Puff puff puff. The War Soul sword was like harvesting radishes. A few large heads and bodies flew out with all their might. The demon clan that surrounded the two of them died one after another, and the two of them finally heaved a sigh of relief. Although they had participated in a few battles, it was slightly different from this one. This time, the people who surrounded them were all experts of the demon clan. They were all cultivators, and there was a difference between heaven and earth between them and martial artists. At the beginning, the two of them were full of fighting spirit, but gradually, they felt the pressure. However, they had no way out, and could only continue to fight bravely. "Are you guys alright?" Tang Jing asked with concern. Yi Dingdang squeezed out a smile that was even uglier than crying, and said, "Of course we're fine." Fang Shishir's expression was also ugly. If it was in the past, when she saw the scene of her head being separated from her body, she would have vomited long ago. However, after experiencing so much, her nerves had become bigger, and she would not have stage fright. Seeing that Yi Dingdang was still able to laugh, Tang Jing was slightly relieved and said, "You guys go into Sumi Tian, I will deal with them." "No, we want to fight side by side with you." The two of them shook their heads, their attitudes as resolute as ever. However, this time, Tang Jing did not follow their wishes, because he had already realized that the danger this time was too great. If he was not careful and did not take care of them, it would lead to a huge mistake, and he would regret it for the rest of his life. "Come in." Tang Jing did not allow them to explain, and with a wave of his hand, the light of Sumi Tian flickered and enveloped the two of them. In the next second, the two of them disappeared without a trace, entering Sumi Tian. Tang Jing finally heaved a sigh of relief. Without any worries, he suddenly turned around, and faced Saint King from afar. The sage also looked at him with a burning gaze. His eyes blossomed with radiance as he said with interest, "Tsk. You're truly an unkillable cockroach. You've endured such a powerful attack, yet you still have battle strength. Tang Zheng put the few pieces of heaven and earth obsidian at his feet into Su Mi Tian, and said with a cold smile, I am an unkillable cockroach. If you want to kill me, then come. Let's see if you can succeed. Chapter 1164. The heaven-splitting axe hacked down fiercely. This time, the momentum was even greater. The ground split open, and a huge crack spread out from under Tang Zheng's feet. Tang Zheng felt it even more strongly. He felt a force that was about to split his head open. He forcefully slashed out, and the battle's soul flew out. Then, he drew his bow and shot an arrow. The shooting sun arrow whistled out again. A sword and an arrow blocked the heaven-splitting axe from the front and back. They were in a deadlock in midair. Bang! The battle's soul flew out and sank into the ground, disappearing. The shooting sun arrow and the heaven-splitting axe retreated a large distance at the same time. At the same time, Saint King's figure flashed, and he was already in front of Tang Zheng. He punched out, as if splitting the sky and earth. Tang Zheng hurriedly raised the holy armor shield to defend. After a loud bang, Tang Zheng hurriedly retreated. His legs drew a deep groove in the ground, and he retreated dozens of meters before stopping. Boom! In midair, the shooting sun arrow was hacked down by the heaven-splitting axe. It shot to the ground, and the tail of the arrow was still trembling. The heaven-splitting axe's attack did not decrease, and it directly struck the holy armor shield. Gotcha! A long crack appeared on the holy armor shield. The holy armor shield was only a heaven-grade magic treasure, and it could not be compared to a saint-grade magic treasure. This time, it finally could not block it. Tang Zheng was extremely frustrated. Before the holy armor shield was completely destroyed, he hurriedly kept it in Sumer world. Facing the Saint King barehanded, he was even less of a match. Azura! Helplessly, he roared. As soon as his mind moved, Shura flew out from Sumer world. His tall body looked down at everything under his feet. The Azura had been suppressed by the Ksitigarbha Sutra, so even in Sumer world, he was in a state of hibernation. At this moment, after leaving Sumer world, Tang Zheng also stopped using the Ksitigarbha Sutra to suppress him. He suddenly opened his eyes, which were as red as blood. It made people feel as if they had fallen into a sea of corpses. It was extremely terrifying. Roar! Azura's roar reverberated throughout the world, causing the leaves of the tree of life to rustle. It was Saint King's first time seeing Azura. He was shocked as he felt a strong killing intent from the other party. He asked in horror, "What is this?" Azura. Chi Yu's voice answered first. Tang Zheng was stunned and exclaimed, "Chi Yu. Haha, kid, we meet again." Chi Yu laughed. "Chi Yu, you treacherous fellow, you actually bewitched the devil clan to steal the heaven and earth obsidian." Tang Zheng said indignantly. "This is called preparing for a rainy day, do you understand? It's not like I don't know what you're thinking. You've already released the 5-clawed golden dragon, which means that you've obtained the heaven and earth obsidian under the imperial city. All the heaven and earth obsidian needed to reforge the stairway to heaven have appeared. If I don't take the first step and snatch the heaven and earth obsidian under the tree of life, wouldn't that give you the chance to reforge the stairway to heaven?" Chi Yu said proudly. "Do you think you can succeed?" Tang Zheng questioned. "The facts have proven that I've succeeded. Didn't you see that my people have already taken away a lot of heaven and earth obsidian? If you can't gather all the heaven and earth obsidian, then don't even think about reforging the stairway to heaven. Am I right?" Tang Zheng had no way to refute. Chi Yu's plan had indeed succeeded. He had perfectly predicted that the devil clan would return to Huaxia so quickly and head straight for the tree of life. As long as he lacked even one heaven and earth obsidian, all his efforts would be in vain. Shura is a creature from the world of spirits and souls. He's extraordinary. You may not be his opponent, so be careful. Chiyu warned. Saint King was not afraid. He was eager to give it a try. A creature from the world of spirits and souls? No wonder the yin chi on his body is so heavy. It's like he's entered a graveyard. Ancestor, don't worry. I'll definitely make this big guy's soul scatter. Dream on. Tang Zheng had seen Shura's strength. He was an existence that could compete with the Dizang of Goguryeo. Although Saint King was powerful, Tang Zheng felt that he was still inferior to the Dizang of Goguryeo. Saint King roared and took the lead to attack Shura. The Asura had just broken free from the suppression of the Kitagarbha Sutra. When he saw the sage rushing over, all of his attention was immediately attracted by the sage. With a roar, the Asura saber slashed out with a schwa sound. The Shura saber collided with the heaven-splitting axe. Sparks flew everywhere. The heaven-splitting innate skill collapsed, and a small gap appeared. Saint King trembled violently and spat out a mouthful of blood. He looked at Shura with a pale face. He had thought that Chiyu's words were exaggerated, but now he understood that it was not exaggerated at all. Shura's strength was really terrifying. Shura pursued and attacked Saint King with the Shura saber again. His body was tall, and when he attacked from mid-air, his strength was even more ferocious. Saint King raised the heaven-splitting axe with difficulty. With a flash of light, the heaven-splitting axe flew out of his hand and landed on the ground. It quickly shrank and finally became the size of a normal axe, dim and dull. Saint King retreated in a sorry state. Suddenly, his foot was tripped by something and he fell heavily to the ground. Shura walked towards him step by step. The violent yin chi rushed towards him, causing him to shudder. Tang Zheng took advantage of this gap and quickly defeated a few demon elites. He collected more than 10 heaven and earth obsidian. At the same time, Tian Chanzi also collected dozens of heaven and earth obsidian on the other side of the Tree of Life. The demons were no match for him at all. Hearing such a big commotion on the other side, he collected the heaven and earth obsidian and quickly moved over. He happened to see the battle between Shura and Saint King. The corner of his mouth twitched a few times. Shura is really too powerful. Saint King fell to the ground and looked at the thing that tripped him. It was actually a corpse, Song Yu's corpse. Damn it! Saint King cursed. He was about to push the corpse away when Chiyu shouted, "Wait! Ancestor, what's wrong? The situation is urgent. I can't care so much. I can only settle for the second best," Chiyu said helplessly. Saint King was confused. Seeing that Shura was about to reach him, he anxiously asked, "Ancestor, shut up. It's all because you're too weak. If I didn't make a move, you would definitely die in front of Shura," Chiyu said hatefully. Saint King looked ashamed, but immediately became overjoyed and said, "Ancestor, you're saying that you're going to be reborn?" "Humph, yes. Although this body isn't too good, in order to avoid total annihilation, this is the only way. You go and restrain Shura," Chiyu ordered. Saint King looked at Shura deeply and swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Although he knew that he was no match for Shura, for Chiyu, he could only give it his all. Saint King roared, as if to encourage himself, and rushed towards Shura. However, he didn't confront him directly. Instead, he pretended to be polite and restrained Shura. Shura couldn't see through Saint King's thoughts. He opened and closed wide, Shura's blade dancing. This area was stirred up by this battle, as if the sky and earth were turned upside down, completely changing its appearance. The flowers and plants on the ground were destroyed, and even the Tree of Life was left with many scars. Juice flowed down the tree trunk, as if it was crying. Tang Zheng was busy collecting Xian stones of heaven and earth. He didn't hear the conversation between Shura and Qi Yu. After some effort, he finally collected all the Xian stones of heaven and earth on the ground. However, there were still more than 20 that fell into the hands of the demon clan. There was no way to snatch them one by one, unless they caught all the demon clan in one fell swoop. Tian Chanzi, stop the demon clan. Don't let them escape, Tang Jing reminded loudly. Tian Chanzi's attention was attracted by Shura and Saint King. This level of life and death battle was rare. For Tian Chanzi, it was a rare opportunity to observe. Don't worry about those small fries. As long as Saint King is dead, they are nothing to worry about. Tian Chanzi said casually, but his heart was not relaxed at all. He was scared. If it weren't for Shura's help, he would have really failed miserably this time. The other demon clans were watching covetously, but they couldn't help at all. Most of these demon clans were in the Yuanying realm of the Golden Core realm. They were a level lower than Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi. They could only watch anxiously. A few demon clans who were not afraid of death saw Saint King in danger and rushed to Shura, trying to help Saint King. Shura kicked a few times, and these people were immediately kicked. With a loud bang, they exploded and turned into a mass of flesh and blood. This made the other demon clans shrink back, and they didn't dare to approach. Saint King's body was already wounded. He had already called back the sky-splitting axe, but he was still no match for Shura. He was almost hit by Shura's saber several times. Saint King's face was pale. From time to time, he secretly looked at Song Yu's body. There was a treasure box next to her body, which contained Qi Yu's soul. Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi's attention was attracted by the battle, and they didn't notice this scene. Little bits of light seeped out of the treasure box and sank into Song Yu's body. This body was quickly transformed, and the vitality that had been cut off gradually glowed again. The ordinary body was strengthened and became more solid. The narrow meridians were widened, and a little bit of true qi was born from the meridians. It flowed along the meridians to the limbs and bones, nourishing the body and tempering the body. A golden elixir gradually formed in the dantian, shining with golden light, as if it was going to come out of the body. The true qi revolved around the golden elixir rapidly, and the golden elixir grew bigger. Finally, as if it was earth-shattering, the golden elixir changed and gradually became the appearance of a human, with a head and limbs growing out. Yuanying. The golden elixir evolved into Yuanying. Yuanying's appearance became clear, and she looked exactly like Song Yu, vivid and lifelike. Yuanying opened her eyes and looked at the changes in her body. Meridians and blood vessels grew out of Yuanying's body, and hair and bones grew out one by one. In the end, she was no different from a real person. Yuanying's eyes were flowing with purple light, and she was filled with a mysterious aura. Yuanying's lips curled up slightly, and at the same time, the corners of her body's mouth also curled up, revealing a strange smile. But she was lying flat, and no one noticed this smile at all. The battle between the Azura and Saint King became more and more thrilling. Saint King's heart almost jumped out of his chest, and he couldn't help but recall the days when he was in the heavens beyond heaven. Back then, he was on tenterhooks every day, and he could encounter such a tragic life and death battle at any time. He was tired of such days. He originally thought that after returning, he would become a peerless powerhouse, and no one would be able to challenge him. But the reality was too cruel. Song Yu's body was completely transformed. At this moment, she was no longer Song Yu, but Qi Yu. Whoosh! Chapter 1165. Qi Yu opened his eyes, and a bright light burst out from his eyes, which was very frightening. Song Yu's shadow was gone. Although it was the same body, it was completely Chi-Yu. This was not the bluff of Song Yu's strength, but a kind of strength from the inside to the outside, which was frightening. At a glance, people would recognize the awe in their hearts. Song Yu stood up straight. Shura and Saint King were still fighting fiercely. The corner of Saint King's eyes had been paying attention to the direction of Chi-Yu. Finally, his eyes lit up and he showed joy. He shouted, "Ancestor!" Others also noticed the movement here. When they saw Song Yu standing up straight, Tang Zhang and Tian Chanzi were surprised at the same time. The two of them saw Xiao Xiaoling's sword pierce Song Yu's heart and cut off his vitality. But at this moment, Song Yu stood up again. Could it be that he was resurrected? Tang Zhang did not have this ability. His 9 revolutions soul return pill could not save a dead person. What's the matter? Tian Chanzi took the lead in shouting. Tang Zhang stared at Song Yu intently. When he heard the word ancestor from Saint King's mouth, his heart trembled. He was shocked and said, "Ancestor. Could it be that you are Chi-Yu?" "Ha ha ha, Tang Zhang, you finally became one." Chi-Yu laughed wildly. His hair and beard were all standing up, and his clothes were fluttering. His face showed an insolent expression, which was completely different from Song Yu. Tang Zhang finally determined that this was indeed not Song Yu, but Chi-Yu's reincarnation. Chi-Yu had been trying to take away Tang Zhang's body. After all, both of them were Skywalkers. With the 9 Yang Saint body, Tang Zhang's physique was more compatible with Chi-Yu, which could guarantee Chi-Yu's cultivation and future achievements. Now, Chi-Yu actually chose the second best option and chose Song Yu's body. Tang Zhang looked at Shura and immediately understood that this was Chi-Yu's decision. The situation of the battle between the Asura and the Sage was already very clear. If there was no external force, the Sage would definitely not be the Asura's opponent. Then, the Devil race would only be sending themselves to their deaths by rushing over here. Chi-Yu naturally wouldn't just sit by and watch. For his grand plan, the Devil race couldn't be completely annihilated, especially Saint King. That was why he took a step back and chose Song Yu's body, in order to preserve the strength of the Devil race. Tang Zhang's expression had already changed. He looked at Chi-Yu and said, "Chi-Yu, I didn't think you would choose Song Yu." Chi-Yu coldly snorted. "Do you think I want to?" There really were quite a few bodies here, but the others were all cultivators. Whether they were alive or dead, their bodies still contained the remnants of their original owners. Only Song Yu was a martial artist. Martial artists and cultivators were 2 different systems. After Chi-Yu took Song Yu's body, he could completely change it according to his will. This was an advantage that cultivators couldn't compare to. That was why, in the end, Song Yu's body enjoyed this opportunity. If Song Yu knew in the underworld, he would definitely be very happy. He would even be willing to give his body to Chi-Yu. He had always wanted to win against Tang Zhang. Before his death, he had always been firmly suppressed by Tang Zhang. He didn't even have the chance to resist. However, after his death, his dream came true. In another way, he used his own body as the price to win against Tang Zhang. Chi-Yu had always been in Tang Zhang's body. He was very clear about the conflict between Tang Zhang and Song Yu. He coldly laughed and said, "Tang Zhang, although Song Yu is dead, I can still feel the strong resentment he left behind for you. He definitely wanted to win against you and kill you. Now that I have taken over his body, I can fulfill his wish." Tang Zhang's expression became colder and colder. He snorted and said, "You should know what kind of person Song Yu is. You will fulfill his wish." Ha! However, Chi-Yu, you are this kind of person, so I shouldn't be surprised. After saying this, Tang Zhang felt a little emotional. The Wu tribe and the demon tribe led by Chi-Yu were completely different. They were not the same kind of people. He really couldn't imagine that the Wu tribe of ancient times would be Qi Yu's subordinates, or even the origin of the Jiuli tribe. The Wu tribe was kind and pure, as if they had gathered the bright side of the world. Back then, why was the Wu tribe sealed? Tang Jing suddenly thought, could it be that there was some unknown secret? Otherwise, why did Qi Yu keep avoiding talking about it? Tang Jing, you know me very well. It's no wonder that we have been together for so long. Qi Yu laughed proudly, since we are so familiar with each other, it's useless to say anything unnecessary. Let's fight. However, there is something I have to remind you. Although the Shura is powerful, he is not under your control. Tang Jing snorted disapprovingly and said, then it's not too late for you to say such big words after you defeat the Shura. Qi Yu looked at Tang Jing lightly, smiled strangely, and walked slowly towards the Shura. Saint King retreated to Qi Yu's side in a sorry state. He looked at him excitedly and said respectfully, Ancestor. Go back and watch carefully. Qi Yu said. Saint King said in fear and trepidation, yes. He looked at Qi Yu with eager eyes. Everyone looked at Qi Yu at the same time. The Shura's attention was also firmly attracted to Qi Yu. Although the Shura did not have consciousness, he was not stupid. He instinctively recognized that Qi Yu was the person who posed the greatest threat to him. For the greatest threat, the Shura naturally paid the greatest attention. Roar! The Shura roared and rushed towards Qi Yu step by step. His speed gradually became faster, and a cold wind blew. Sand and stones flew, and it was incomparably violent. When the other demons saw this, they instinctively retreated. Their faces were pale, and they realized that this level of battle was far beyond their ability to bear. To avoid being affected, it was better to retreat further away. Tang Zhang and Tian Chanzi did not retreat. Instead, they stared at the Shura. Tang Zhang was full of confidence in the Shura. He knew the Shura too well. The Shura was born in the 9 Serenities Hell. If it were not for the Dizang of Goguryeo, the world of spirits and souls would have been slaughtered by the Shura. Although Qi Yu was resurrected, his strength was definitely not at his peak. Inner demons, what was the cultivation level of Qi Yu back then? Tang Jing asked. Of course it was the realm of great success. As for what it was in the end, I don't know. The inner demons replied. Tang Zhang had a rough idea. The inner demons and Qi Yu's cultivation level were not too different. The inner demons knew a lot about Qi Yu, so his words should be true. After a powerhouse of great success was resurrected, his cultivation level was definitely not low. As for the comparison with the Shura, that was unknown. Qi Yu was still walking step by step, very slowly towards the Shura. His face was calm, as if he did not put the Shura in his eyes at all. Finally, the Shura rushed in front of Qi Yu. The Shura blade fell from the sky and quickly slashed down. Qi Yu stretched out a hand and made a grabbing motion toward the ground. Bang! The ground exploded, and a cold light broke out of the ground. The War Soul sword flew out from the ground and fell into Qi Yu's hands. The sword light overflowed in all directions. Sword Soul, you and I are finally fighting side by side again. Let them see your true power. Qi Yu gently flicked the War Soul sword. The War Soul sword buzzed and trembled, and the light became more and more dazzling. Chapter 1166. Tang Jing stared at the War Soul sword in disbelief. He had thought that the War Soul sword would no longer listen to Qi Yu's control. Last time might have been a coincidence, but now he understood that his thoughts were too naive. Damn it, it must be the sword spirit. When Qi Yu appeared and allowed the sword spirit to fuse into the Battle Soul sword, he actually left behind a backup plan so that he could control the Battle Soul sword from behind. He is really scheming, I was completely fooled by him. He tried to establish a connection with the War Soul Sword, but found that there was no reaction at all. Chiyu held the War Soul Sword in his hand and stood tall. The sword light was dazzling as it descended from the sky and charged towards the Azura. The Azura saber shone brightly, leaving a long trail as it swept across the sky. In the next second, it fiercely collided with the War Soul Sword. The two rays of light went against the flow and rushed into the sky from the point of impact. Rustle, rustle, rustle. The leaves fluttered in the air, and with a few cautious sounds, a few branches fell from the sky. The tree of life became a fish in the pond and was damaged once again. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth fluctuated violently. Tang Jing shouted that something was wrong. In the past, the Tree of Life was protected by the 8 Desolation Great Array, so even if there was a battle, it would not be affected. But now that the Great Array had been broken, the Tree of Life had lost its protection. Although the Tree of Life's resistance to attacks was already very strong, it was still difficult for it to withstand the attacks of Chiyu and the Azura. If the Tree of Life was affected, then the world's spiritual energy would change. If the Tree of Life fell, then the world's spiritual energy could no longer be transformed, let alone be raised to the level of a great world. Tang Zheng understood the stakes too well, so his expression became less serious. However, he and Tian Chanzi had no choice. Facing the battle between the Azura and Chiyu, even he was powerless and could not participate. Tian Chanzi saw Tang Zheng's worry and comforted him. Whether the Tree of Life is damaged or not, that is a matter of the future. Let's take care of the things in front of us first and pass through this stage. Tang Zheng nodded bitterly. He had no other choice but to do this. Tian Chanzi changed the topic and said, however, Chiyu's strength is really strong. Even after being reborn, he still has such a cultivation base. No wonder he was the leader of a powerful tribe in ancient times and almost dominated the world. After Tian Chanzi was reborn, his cultivation had dropped a lot compared to when he was alive, so he knew that Chiyu's current strength was far below his true level. There was no doubt that in the future, Chiyu's cultivation would advance by leaps and bounds, gradually returning to his peak state. At that time, it would be even more difficult to restrain him. Even if he joined forces with Tang Zheng and the Empyrean Fairy, they might not be able to defeat Chiyu. Tian Chanzi fell into deep worry and said, Tang Zheng, Chiyu's strength is most likely at the edge of the Grand Ascension stage. Shura might not necessarily be able to win. Tang Zheng's heart sank. He knew that Shura was only a hair's breadth away from the Grand Ascension stage because Dizong of Goguryeo was at the Grand Ascension stage, which was why he was able to suppress Shura. If Chiyu's cultivation base was also at the edge of the Grand Ascension stage, then Shura would be at a disadvantage and they would be in danger. Tian Chanzi's guess was correct. If Chiyu had found a good body and been reborn, then his cultivation base would definitely be at the Grand Ascension stage. However, he had taken a step back and found Song Yu's body at the last minute, so he was naturally far from being at the Grand Ascension stage. Currently, he was only at the peak of the 9th stage of the Soul Formation stage, which was only a hair's breadth away from the Grand Ascension stage. However, for Chiyu, crossing this threshold was only a matter of time, and it would not take too long. The battle between Shura and Chiyu was earth-shattering. Everyone was stunned. Tang Zheng had never seen a battle of this level other than in the Ghost Realm, so he could not hide the shock on his face. This time, not only did the demon elites retreat, but even Tang Zheng, Tian Chanzi, and Saint King had to retreat step by step. In the end, they retreated out of the range of the Tree of Life. In the distance, one could only see 2 people, one tall and one short, fighting with all their might. Shura had the advantage of height, but Chiyu was more agile. He was like a flash of light, shuttling back and forth in midair. When his sword flashed, it would definitely bring a large amount of black chi to Shura's body. Shura did not have a real physical body. Although he was tall, he was formed from the fusion of countless vengeful spirits. Therefore, when he was injured, what left his body was a stream of yin qi. A stream of black yin qi surrounded the tree of life. The flowers and plants on the ground quickly withered and lay on the ground softly. In the end, they turned into a charred black color. The vitality in this space was being consumed little by little. In addition, Chiyu's attack made this space even worse. It was a mess. The charred plants and trees danced in the air, and sand and stones flew. This oasis seemed to have turned into a barren desert. Shura suffered a lot from the war soul sword, and there were many wounds on his body. However, he did not retreat. Instead, he roared again and again, and attacked Chiyu even more angrily. The Shura had only one thought, and that was to kill. Although it had suffered a lot, the killing intent in its heart grew stronger and stronger. The cold wind between heaven and earth roared angrily, as if it had become a ghost world. Chiyu flew up and circled in front of the Shura. He roared, "So what if you're in Shura? Under the attack of my 9 shaman sword technique, you can only passively take a beating." The 9 shaman sword technique was Chiyu's ultimate technique. There were only a total of 9 swords, and each sword contained a myriad of changes. This was a sword technique that he created by fusing various secret techniques passed down by the shaman clan. It had to be said that Chiyu was a genius. After summarizing the achievements of his predecessors, he mastered them and turned them into his own. This was what Tang Zheng had hoped for. A true peerless ranker did not only inherit the legacy of his predecessors, but also created something on the basis of it. This was a true peerless ranker. Without a doubt, Chiyu was this kind of person. In fact, the shaman clan had been around for a long time. Before Chiyu, the shaman clan was already a tribe that had existed for a long time. It was only under the leadership of Chiyu that they truly flourished and obtained eye-catching achievements, almost unifying the world. The shaman clan was the foundation of the 9 Li tribe. Chiyu came from the shaman clan, and then led the shaman clan to conquer the world. He unified the other 8 main tribes and then merged them into the 9 Li tribe. This was the origin of the 9 Li tribe. But later on, many people only knew about the 9 Li tribe, but they knew very little about the shaman clan. The light on the war soul sword became more and more intense, so piercing that people could not open their eyes. Tang Zheng subconsciously narrowed his eyes into slits. This time, the power displayed by the war soul sword far exceeded the power in his hands, causing him to feel a sense of loss. Now that he saw the war soul sword erupt with such a powerful power, his heartstrings trembled. Suddenly, Tang Zheng realized that he had seen a double image. The war soul sword seemed to have turned from 1 into 2, 2 into 4, and finally into 9 shining swords. Tang Zheng suddenly opened his eyes, the sword light became more and more dazzling, burning his eyes until they hurt. However, he still persevered, clearly discovering that these swords were not double images, but real 9 swords. The war soul sword was something that Tang Zheng had refined bit by bit. He had never found out that the war soul sword could transform into 9 swords, which made him feel uneasy. He really knew too little about the war soul sword, especially that sword spirit. Although it had fused with the war soul back then, the war soul's consciousness was very weak, and could not be compared to the sword spirit that had its own consciousness. Therefore, the sword spirit in the war soul sword was the foundation. He did not understand the sword spirit well enough, so his understanding of the war soul sword was also relatively limited. He stomped his feet hatefully and said, "Chiyu is really a cunning old fox. You lied to me for so long." However, he did not know that the sword spirit was not an ordinary artifact spirit. This sword spirit was originally the sword spirit of Chiyu's sword. However, in the Battle of Zhuolu, Chiyu's sword was destroyed, but the sword spirit was left behind. The sword spirit and the sword attendant's soul fused into one. The sword attendant survived, but in the end, died in the sky pit of the Chongbai mountain. After countless years, the sword spirit and the sword attendant's soul were inseparable. Coincidentally, the sword spirit was discovered by the National Security Bureau and the people of the island nation. In the end, under the control of Qi Yu, the sword spirit fused with the war soul sword, increasing its quality. Qi Yu deliberately sealed the sword spirit's original memories, so that even the sword spirit itself could not remember what happened in the past. Therefore, when Tang Jing released the sword spirit that had fused with the war soul sword, he did not notice this point. The sword spirit was like a piece of white paper, allowing Tang Jing to draw on it. Unfortunately, the sword spirit was an unstable factor. Once Qi Yu opened the switch, the sword spirit's sealed memories would be restored and it would return to its original appearance. The war soul sword naturally became the sword in Qi Yu's hand. Although Tang Jing was not clear about the details, he could roughly guess what was going on. His expression became extremely ugly. This was equivalent to making wedding clothes for others, and it was all for naught. Tang Jing stared at the war soul sword without blinking. The 9 swords seemed to be mocking him. He clenched his fists tightly and gritted his teeth. Qi Yu, do you think the war soul sword will be snatched away by you just like that? Even if you take my things away, I will take them back. Tang Jing secretly swore. Tang Jing was not someone who would easily admit defeat. Although he was tricked this time and suffered a setback, how could he give up just like that? Qi Yu glanced at Tang Jing from the corner of his eyes and knew what he was thinking. He smiled faintly and said in his heart, Tang Jing, you want to take back the war soul sword, but you will never have the chance. This is my sword, and it was only temporarily in your hands before. Now that I have been reborn, how can there be a share for you? I will let you see its power, and let you know what it means to cast pearls before swine, and what it means to be covered in dust. In Qi Yu's eyes, the war soul sword in Tang Jing's hands was just a dust-covered sword. Qi Yu pointed his finger, and 9 swords flew out. The Shura was surrounded by the 9 swords, and he was firmly locked down by the 9 swords. Break! Qi Yu roared, and the 9 swords all trembled at the same time, releasing waves of high-pitched sword cries that were sharp and ear-piercing, as if they wanted to tear apart the space. Whiz! The 9 swords moved at the same time, stabbing towards the Shura from 9 different directions in a very tricky manner. Puff puff puff. Chapter 1167. 9 swords, each sword hit the Shura's vital points. If it was an ordinary person, they would definitely die after taking these 9 swords. The Shura was not an ordinary person, it was not even human. Therefore, when it fell to the ground, its body seemed to have opened up a hole. Black qi flowed out from the wound, and in an instant, black-yin qi enveloped its entire body. Below the tree of life, the originally warm scene of grass and birds flying in the air turned into a hell on earth. The cold wind roared, causing people to shudder. The Shura blade was still in the Shura's hand, but its light dimmed. Tang Jing's heart trembled, his eyes almost popped out. He shouted in disbelief, Shura. The Shura did not respond to him, quietly lying on the ground as if it was really dead. He wanted to rush up and see what happened, but he was pulled back by Tian Chanzi. Be careful. Don't go. Tian Chanzi said with a heavy expression, if the Shura is dead, it would be useless for you to go. Instead, facing Qi Yu, you won't have a chance to escape. If it's not dead, you won't be able to help. Tang Jing stopped in his tracks, understanding that Tian Chanzi's words were reasonable. The two of them stared at the Shura, and the others also stared at the Shura. The Shura gave them too much of a shock. No one could be sure that the Shura had died like this. Even Qi Yu could not be sure. The Shura did not have any life force, so it was impossible to determine whether it was dead or alive from afar. Chiyu carefully walked towards the Shura. Although he was confident in his attack, he could not be at ease without personally confirming it. Chiyu stopped in front of the Shura. He saw that the yin qi in the wounds was leaking out, causing the Shura's body to be completely covered by a layer of dense yin qi. The Shura's body was actually becoming blurry. What's going on? Chiyu muttered to himself. Humph, no matter what's wrong with you, I'll give you a few more swords. With a thought, he pointed his finger at the Shura. The 9 war spirit swords fell from the sky at the same time, attacking the Shura. Piu, the war soul sword passed through the Azura's body without any hindrance. The Azura did not have the slightest reaction, but his body had a few more holes. When the others saw this scene, they were so shocked that they trembled all over. Crap! Tang Zheng subconsciously cried out in alarm, his face turning even paler. Could it be that Shura is really dead? This was far beyond his expectations. The devil clansmen simultaneously revealed a joyful expression, and some even cheered. Azura had given them a great deal of pressure. Seeing Azura die, the huge rock in their hearts was immediately removed. The corners of Chiyu's mouth also curled up in joy, and his eyes became relaxed. He turned his head to look at Tang Jing, who was still in shock, as if to say, Tang Jing, now you know how powerful I am. Back then, in the world of spirits and souls, Chiyu had seen the power of Azura and naturally had an assessment of his strength. He had to admit that Azura was indeed extraordinary and was a natural anomaly. In fact, the Dizang of Goguryo even needed to use the Ksitigarbha Sutra to truly suppress it. As for the matter of the Dizang of Goguryo teaching Tangjing the Ksitigarbha Sutra, Chiyu and the inner demons were very clear about it. However, things like inheritance were not just because they could learn the Ksitigarbha Sutra in Tang Zheng's body. The Ksitigarbha Sutra was a secret, and other than Tang Jing, no one else could learn it. Therefore, even though Chiyu knew that the Ksitigarbha Sutra could suppress Azura, he could not use this method. Now that he had killed Azura with his own strength, Chiyu's confidence gradually rose. When he was hiding in Tang Zheng's body, he was really suppressed by Tang Jing, and even Chiyu's heart blood was sucked away. If he had Chiyu's heart, then after he was reborn, his strength would definitely not stop at the threshold of the Mahayana realm, and he would not have to spend so much effort to deal with Azura. Roar! Suddenly, a roar came from Azura's mouth. It was earth-shattering, and it shook the leaves of the trees. Azura exploded with a bang, and it turned into wisps of yin qi that soared into the sky like a tornado, sweeping towards Chiyu. Chiyu's heartstrings trembled, and he tried to block it, but he found that the yin qi had already gathered from all directions, enveloping his whole body. It seeped into his body from his mouth, nose, ears, eyes, and even his pores. Chiyu screamed in shock, what's going on? It's not dead. Azura was indeed not dead, but it had changed. This change made Chiyu panic, and he watched helplessly as the yin qi seeped into his body. He hurriedly urged his true qi to block the yin qi. However, the yin qi was fierce and unstoppable. Chiyu's eyes burst with a terrifying light, and he growled, I want to see what ability you have. Get out of here. Chiyu had rich battle experience, and after the initial panic, he immediately calmed down. War Soul Sword, enter my body. The 9 War Soul Swords merged into one and quickly shrank, until they were almost invisible to the naked eye. Then, Azura opened his mouth and the War Soul Sword flew in. This scene left Tang Jing dumbstruck. He had been with the War Soul Sword all day, but he didn't know that it had this ability. The War Soul Sword disappeared, but in Chiyu's body, it was like a fish in water, walking through his meridians. Wherever the sword light passed, the yin qi would be swept away. The yin qi was pervasive. Although the War Soul Sword was very powerful, Chiyu's body was still rapidly consuming his life force. The surface of his skin gradually turned black, like charcoal. Chiyu obviously understood what this meant. If he could not expel the yin qi from his body in time, the yin qi would destroy his body. If the skin did not exist, where would the hair be? Without a physical body, Chiyu's power would naturally not exist, and he would not be a match for the Asura. This guy looks like a killing machine, but I didn't expect him to have such intelligence. He actually used such a method to deal with me. Chiyu thought hatefully, and could not help but be puzzled. With his understanding of the Asura, it only had killing in its heart, and was equivalent to a walking corpse. Although it was powerful, its intelligence was effective. It only knew how to charge forward, and was not much different from a 3-year-old child. This time, the change in the Asura's attack was something that Chiyu had never seen before. This meant that its intelligence was actually increasing, which was extraordinary and did not match Chiyu's judgment. Strange, there must be something strange. Chiyu vowed. In imminent danger, he did not have the energy to search for the reason. He could only desperately urge the war soul sword to sweep away the yin qi. The Asura's yin qi was too strong, it covered the sky and covered the earth, completely enveloping Chiyu. Even if the war soul sword swept away the yin qi in an area, there would immediately be more yin qi seeping into his body, destroying all the previous efforts. Chapter 1168. The others stared at this scene unblinkingly. When they saw Chiyu's entire body turn into charcoal, they couldn't help but feel their blood run cold. Yin Qi, this is the effect of Yin Qi. Tian Chanzi excitedly waved his fist as he spoke. Tang Zhang's eyes lit up. He naturally understood the power of Yin Qi. The reason why humans were unable to stay in the ghost realm for long periods of time was because Yin Qi was extremely harmful to the human body. It corroded a person's yang qi and ultimately led to death. Tang Jing could freely travel through the ghost realm because he had the 9 yang saint body. He did not fear Yin Qi, or it could be said that Yin Qi was unable to corrode the powerful yang qi in his body. Chiyu himself was also a celestial with the 9 yang saint body. However, his physical body had already been destroyed, leaving only his soul residing in Song Yu's body. This body did not have many special features, so naturally it was unable to resist the corrosion of Yin Qi. The Shura was born from the ghost realm's evil Qi. Its Yin Qi is much more powerful than normal Yin Qi. Now it seems that it is indeed not normal. Chiyu is going to suffer a great loss. Tang Jing inwardly nodded as he spoke. Yes, who would have thought that the Shura would have such a move? This is truly an eye-opener. Tian Chanzi sighed. The two of them were not like Chiyu, who directly thought that the Shura's wisdom was slowly budding. Otherwise, Tang Zheng would have been even more shocked. Dizong of Goguryeo had never mentioned that the Shura's wisdom would be slowly budding. Naturally, Tang Zheng also did not think in this direction. The demons turned pale with fright. They were dumbstruck as they stared blankly at Chiyu. However, they were unable to do anything and were unable to interfere. Chiyu continued to use Battle's soul to sweep away the Yin Qi. Both sides were in a deadlock as they fought back and forth. Ah! Chiyu roared and puffed out his chest. Puff, 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 streams of blood gushed out from his body, and there were a few more bloody holes on his body. Chiyu's eyes were crimson red as he gritted his teeth and roared, "With my blood, with my soul as the guide, blood will flow from the heavens to the earth." Blood flowed out of Chiyu's body like poisonous snakes. They fell to the ground and then wriggled in all directions. Everywhere they passed, the earth turned red. The vegetation was also dyed red and emitted a demonic light. The air was filled with a nauseating stench of blood. Coupled with the howling of the wind, it made one's heart turn cold. Tang Zheng was shocked to see a stream of blood swimming towards him. He hurriedly retreated and said, Tian Chanzi, retreat. There's something strange about this blood. Don't let the blood stain it. Tian Chanzi also reminded. The two of them had unique eyesight. They could see that the blood was very strange, especially the words that Qiyu was chanting. They seemed to be an incantation. He was definitely using some strange divine ability that made people shudder. When Saint King heard these 16 words, his eyes were filled with shock. He had once seen these 16 words in the ancient records of the demon race. However, the description of these 16 words was not detailed. It only said that in ancient times, it was a very harmful spell that could not be easily used. Otherwise, it would have a backlash effect on the caster. The name of this spell was Blood Soul Sacrifice. It used blood and souls as a sacrifice. As for the specific effects, there were no records in the ancient records. Saint King also did not know. Seeing Qiyu use this divine ability that disappeared without a trace with his own eyes, Saint King was somewhat excited. He stared at Qiyu with incomparable fanaticism. Ah! A scream interrupted Saint King's thoughts. He subconsciously turned his head to look, only to see that the scream came from the mouth of one of his subordinates. The blood flowed to the feet of this person and quickly flowed along his legs to the rest of his body. In an instant, it was full of his body. He looked like there were many red lines under his skin. It was very strange. He screamed and struggled, but there was no way to resist. In the end, he rolled on the ground to no avail. Saint King was about to rush over to rescue him, but found that this person had stopped rolling and was twitching non-stop. His skin quickly carbonized and finally stopped twitching. There was no life left, and he turned into black charcoal. A cold wind blew, and this body seemed to fall apart, turning into ashes and drifting away with the wind. When everyone saw this scene, they felt a chill run through their bodies. It was as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Looking at each other, many people screamed and fled. How could this spell be so strange? After cutting off a person's life, it still produced such a terrifying effect. Quick, look at Qiyu! Tang Jing shouted and pointed at Qiyu. Everyone turned their heads to look and found that Qiyu was changing. The originally carbonized skin was actually returning to normal little by little. His physical condition was recovering. Tang Zhang's head lit up as he understood what was going on. He cried out involuntarily, he's using a spell to absorb the life of others to make up for himself. This spell is too insidious. It's against the harmony of the heavens. Tian Chanzi immediately identified, the demon race has many strange spells, and this is probably one of them. It's a pity that he's absorbing the life of his own people. He's really ruthless. Tang Zheng sneered and said, of course he's ruthless. He doesn't even care about the lives of hundreds of millions of people. What's the big deal about a few of his subordinates dying? Indeed, it's not a big deal. The demon race has always had this tradition. Tian Chanzi also agreed. Qiyu is absorbing the life of others. Doesn't that mean he can fight against the Shurazin Qi? Tang Zhang's head moved and suddenly sank. His expression became serious. Tian Chanzi didn't answer, because it was still unknown who would win in the confrontation between this spell and the Shura. Everyone felt the danger. No one dared to let the blood near them and fled like a swarm of bees. There was no blood, and Qiyu's condition worsened again. His skin turned black. Qiyu trembled violently. Bang! With a loud sound, he knelt on the ground with one knee and stubbornly raised his head. He didn't give in. Qiyu actually knelt. It was obvious how much damage the Shura had done to him. Saint King's expression kept changing. He was hesitant. Qiyu's importance to him was self-evident. If he really allowed Qiyu to be defeated by the Shura, then the demon race would be unable to recover. Their painstaking efforts to return would be in vain. No. He definitely couldn't accept this reality. Saint King's eyes were cold. He glanced at the people around him and immediately locked onto one of them. He grabbed him and threw him into the blood on the ground. Ah! Before that person could react, he was possessed by the blood. He immediately rolled on the ground and finally convulsed. He quickly carbonized and scattered with the wind. Chiyu's condition also quickly improved. His eyes gradually shone, and his life force recovered bit by bit. He looked at Saint King with eyes full of admiration. Saint King's heart was bitter, but for the sake of the great cause, he had to sacrifice his own subordinates. Your sacrifice is worth it. In the future, the great cause of the demon race will be due to your contributions. I will remember you. Saint King muttered to himself, as if comforting the souls of these people. Tang Zhang's pupils constricted, and he looked at Heaven Monk at the same time. His face turned pale, and he could see the shock in each other's eyes. Saint King didn't hesitate to sacrifice the lives of his subordinates. He even did it himself. Hurry up and run, why are you still standing there like idiots? Tang Zhang roared, reminding the demon clan. The demons woke up from their dream and immediately scattered. Saint King caught 2 more people and let the blood attach to them. But the others fled, so he couldn't catch anyone for a while. I'll go stop him. Tian Chanzi volunteered and rushed in front of Saint King. With a shake of his long sword, he greeted Saint King with the heavenly fairy sword technique. Saint King was furious. You're courting death. Saint King's cultivation was higher than Tian Chanzi's. Naturally, he wasn't afraid of him. His sky-opening axe fiercely counterattacked Tian Chanzi. Chiyu's situation took a turn for the worse as he didn't have the new life force to continuously replenish him. Saint King saw this and was anxious. Facing Tian Chanzi's entanglement, he couldn't immediately win and couldn't bear to be disturbed. This can't go on. Saint King was very anxious. His face suddenly changed, and he shouted, "Stop! All of you stop!" The demons subconsciously stopped and stood stiffly in the same place. They turned to look at Saint King with a complicated expression. Come back for me. The time has come when the ancestor needs you all. For the sake of the devil race's 1,000-year great undertaking, this is your honor. You all will forever be remembered by the devil race. You all are heroes of the devil race. The sage said sonorously. Many people who were hesitant and fearful immediately changed their expressions. Their eyes became determined, like martyrs who were going to die. They turned around and walked resolutely toward the blood. Their footsteps were heavy, with the determination to die. There was no panic in their footsteps, nor was there any panic or wavering like before. Tang Zheng saw this scene and his heart sank. This was the demons. For the same goal, they were willing to die without caring about their own lives. What kind of spirit was this? Fearless spirit. Even for many righteous sects, it was extremely difficult for such a situation to occur. From this, it could be seen that the strength of the demon race was not undeserved, nor was it baseless. They were united, and did not fear death. This completely surpassed many of the scattered righteous sections. The demons are so terrifying. When we fight them in the future, we can't let our guard down. Tang Jing silently made up his mind. Although the Azura currently had the upper hand, Tang Jing did not think that he could completely crush the demon clan this time and capture them all in one fell swoop. The demons were like wild grass. Even a wildfire couldn't burn them, they would grow again when the spring breeze blew. Across the long river of history, the demon's shadow had never been cut off. Naturally, it was impossible to completely destroy the demons with just a few people. Stop them! Tian Chanzi shouted. Tang Zhang's figure flashed and stopped a demon. However, the other side deliberately bypassed him and threw themselves on the blood on the ground. Immediately, a victorious smile appeared on his face. Finally, this smile froze. Lines of blood covered his body. He was like a statue, motionless. He didn't even fall to the ground and wail. He was completely different from the people before. This made Tang Jing sink deeper and deeper. In the blink of an eye, the demon's transformation made people feel awe and fear. Chapter 1169. The demons fell one after another, sacrificing more than 10 lives before Qiyu finally recovered. He was full of energy and vitality, his eyes emitting a terrifying light and murderous aura. Scent pound. Tang Zhang and Tian Chanzi helplessly stared at each other. The two looked at each other and saw the helplessness in each other's eyes. The demons were not afraid of death and would rather sacrifice their lives to help Qiyu. This was something they could not stop. Tian Chanzi simply gave up on entangling with Saint King. Saint King also did not chase after him. Although his heart ached, his eyes were filled with pride. He looked at Tian Chanzi in ridicule and said, "Do you think the demons are all afraid of death? Let me tell you, for the sake of the demon's great cause, anyone can be sacrificed." Tian Chanzi coldly snorted and did not argue with him. The facts were indisputable. "What do we do?" Tian Chanzi looked at Tang Jing. Tang Jing secretly sighed. Shura and Qiyu, who would win and who would lose, was still unknown. They could only wait and see. Tian Chanzi understood Tang Zhang's meaning and chose to remain silent. "Shura, get out of my body." Qiyu roared, his entire body erupting with an earth-shattering aura. Rays of light shone and sword Qi soared into the sky. It was like a divine sword, causing people to tremble. Puff puff puff, a series of yin Qi retreated from Qiyu's body. The yin Qi tried to enter again, but Qiyu's body was like an iron wall, unable to move forward. This was the result of Qiyu activating his true Qi to seal all the openings in his body, building the strongest great wall, blocking the yin Qi outside his body. Looking at the yin Qi that was rushing left and right, Qiyu's face revealed a relaxed expression. He disdainfully said, "Shura, you are only so-so. Watch me destroy you today." With that said, the War Soul sword flew out from his body and steadily landed in Qiyu's palm. Qiyu stood proudly with his sword in hand like a god of war. Shwa! The War Soul sword descended and struck the yin Qi with lightning speed. The yin energy hurriedly retreated like a receding tide. Qiyu chased after it and quickly swung his sword a few more times, forcing the yin Qi to retreat far away. Now you know what fear is. Qiyu was immensely pleased with himself as he laughed maniacally. The yin Qi retreated with a whoosh, only stopping when it reached the trunk of the tree of life. Then, it changed its form. Qiyu's pupils constricted, and his expression changed slightly. "Do you have any other tricks up your sleeve?" The yin Qi stabilized and turned into the appearance of a human. This was a miniature version of the Shura, completely different from the previous Colossus. It was about the same height as a real person, but its eyes were less muddle-headed and more intelligent. Tang Zhang looked at this scene in disbelief. He never thought that the Azura could actually become like this. In the past, the Azura were all huge monsters. Very powerful. The Shura stretched out his slender finger and pointed at Qiyu. His words were filled with killing intent, but he seemed to be stuttering. "You can actually speak." Qiyu was shocked. In the past, Shura had always been shouting and shouting, but he had never spoken a complete sentence. But now, he could actually speak human language, no different from a normal person. Tang Jing also looked at the Shura in surprise and muttered to himself, "The Shura has changed. What is going on? Look at his eyes, there is actually the light of wisdom. He is not a machine that only knows how to kill." He was very clear about the Shura's situation, but the current Shura was too unfamiliar. Not only had his body undergone a huge change, but he was also shining with wisdom. What was the reason for all these changes? Could it be that the battle with Qiyu had caused such a change? Looking at Qiyu's reaction, it was obvious that he did not know what was going on. Tang Jing could not help but feel a little disappointed. Of course. I can speak. Facing Qiyu's question, the Shura stammered as he replied. Qiyu suddenly turned his head to look at Tang Jing and found that his reaction was similar to his own. He understood that all these changes were not because of Tang Jing, but he could not figure it out, so he temporarily gave up the idea of using his brain cells and said, "So what if you can speak? You are still not my match." Ha! Ha! The Shura let out a short burst of disdainful laughter. His eyes were cold. It was obvious that he was refuting Qiyu. Qiyu frowned and directly used his actions to speak. The war soul in his hand exploded with a resplendent sword light and flew towards the Shura. A cold light flashed in the Shura's eyes. With the point of his finger, the Azura saber also flew up. It was obvious that the Azura saber was also very large, but now it had become the size of an ordinary sword. When the Azura saber flew out, a terrifying yin-chi that caused people to tremble in fear was emitted from the Azura saber. Ew! The sound of ghosts wailing and wolves howling rang out. A burst of pitch-black yin-chi rose up from the Azura saber and immediately transformed into a huge ghost head. It was incomparably ferocious. Wherever it passed, the temperature of the air would plummet and the cold wind would blow. If an ordinary person saw this scene, they would be scared out of their wits. However, Qiyu was not afraid at all. The power of the War Soul sword increased sharply. In an instant, the sword and blade collided. There were no sparks. Under the cover of such a strong yin-chi, even sparks could not be shot out. The ferocious ghost head opened its mouth and bit onto the War Soul sword. The powerful yin-chi wrapped around the War Soul sword and the War Soul sword began to buzz and tremble. "Sword Soul, leave the sword!" Qiyu roared loudly. The War Soul sword also let out a high-pitched cry, as if it was responding to him. With a flash of light, a figure rushed out from the War Soul sword. It also opened its mouth and bit onto the ghost head. Immediately, the two sides fought back and forth, desperately biting and tearing at each other. Tang Zheng's eyeballs almost popped out because the figure that flew out from the War Soul sword was the War Soul. Back then, he had subdued the martyr's soul in Ordinary Balance's unmarked graveyard. This was also the origin of the War Soul sword's name. However, after the Sword Soul and the War Soul sword merged, the War Soul was replaced by the Sword Soul and never appeared again. At this moment, Qiyu actually summoned the Sword Soul and fought fiercely with the ghost head. This opened Tang Zheng's eyes and he had an idea. Could it be that the artifact spirit also left the magic treasure to fight? He had never thought about this before. At this moment, he was suddenly enlightened and asked, "Inner demons, can the artifact spirit be separated from the magic treasure?" "Of course you can, but only when you reach the grade of sacred artifact or above can you do this." The inner demons replied without any surprise. "Why didn't you tell me before? You didn't ask." Tang Jing rolled his eyes speechlessly. However, ordinary people don't have this ability. Even if they have a sacred artifact, it's not that easy to do this. The master must reach a high degree of compatibility with the magic treasure to be able to do this. Especially the higher the master's cultivation, the higher the grade of the magic treasure, and the further the artifact spirit can be away from the magic treasure. The inner demons explained. Chapter 1170. The Sword Soul and the Ghost Head fought wantonly. Enrich and Sword Chi danced in the air and soared up, causing the Tree of Life to scatter countless branches and leaves. The trunk was riddled with holes and juice flowed out, as if the Tree of Life was crying. This caused Tang Zheng to shake his head. This was not the way to go on. Chi Yu and the Azura had yet to determine a victor, and the Tree of Life was the first to be affected. Saber Soul, kill! The Azura roared with killing intent. His voice was even more straightforward than before, as if he was adapting to speaking and becoming more proficient. The Azura was like a baby, gradually evolving from babbling. It was unknown what level he would reach in the end. The two words, Saber Soul, were obviously the name of the ghost head. The War Soul Sword's artifact spirit was called Sword Soul, and the Azura Saber's artifact spirit was called Saber Soul. The Sword Soul and the Saber Soul had met their opponents and were locked in a stalemate. The Tree of Life is too dangerous. I'll go protect the Tree of Life. Tang Zheng decided that he could not sit still and wait for death. In a flash, he arrived in front of the Tree of Life. Streams of Enrich and Sword Chi surged over like a tide. He hurriedly cast a spell in an attempt to block them, but the battle between the Sword Soul and the Saber Soul was too intense. For a moment, he was like a small boat drifting in the sea, bobbing and sinking, extremely dangerous. Five-clawed golden dragon, hurry up and help me! Tang Zheng shouted. Previously, the five-clawed golden dragon had been indifferent, but now, he could not help but summon it. The five-clawed golden dragon was lazy and uninterested in the battle. He said listlessly, "They haven't decided the victor yet. What's the hurry?" Tang Zheng rolled his eyes and said sternly, "Are you going to help or not?" The five-clawed golden dragon's heart trembled, knowing that Tang Zheng was about to flip out. He compromised and said, "Of course I'll help. Why are you so fierce?" Tang Zheng's arm flickered with a golden light. The five-clawed golden dragon tattoo was lifelike and was about to soar into the sky. Suddenly, a gust of cold wind blew from above his head, causing him to feel as if he was bathing in the spring breeze. What happened? Tang Zheng understood that there was definitely something fishy and hurriedly raised his head to look. A green light leaped into his eyes and the leaves rustled as a branch drooped down. It seemed to be a large hand that lightly waved at Tang Zheng as if it was waving at him. Tang Zheng rubbed his eyes, thinking that he was seeing things. But when he opened his eyes, he was sure that he wasn't seeing things. There really was a branch on the Tree of Life. The branch extended from his side, and a green light spread out from the branch, enveloping Tang Zheng. A powerful spiritual energy rushed from the top of his head into his brain. His whole body quivered, and the exhaustion of the previous battle and the consumption of his true chi were swept away. A feeling of good fortune struck his heart, and his true chi rushed up with whooshing sounds. Boom! Suddenly, there seemed to be a bomb exploding in his brain. His true chi rushed into Yuanying like a tide. Yuanying opened her eyes, which were as bright as stars. Yuanying's body became more three-dimensional. Her bones cracked and grew rapidly. Even hair grew out of Yuanying's skin. Yuanying is evolving. Tang Zheng was overjoyed, but he quickly suppressed his surprise and circulated the ancient clear heaven scroll, guiding the flow of true chi. Second grade of the divine transformation realm. After a while, he was stunned and only wanted to shout and cheer. He actually broke through it this time. Without a doubt, this was the effect of the Tree of Life. The green light emitted by the branch was filled with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. This was the Tree of Life helping him. Could it be that the Tree of Life also had a consciousness? His conjecture was immediately confirmed. After the branch went around him, it came to the front of the Sword Soul and the Saber Soul. The green light enveloped them in an instant, and the two sides that were in a deadlock trembled violently. The saber soul's ferocious face calmed down a bit, and the sword soul's sword chi also decreased sharply. Azura and Chiyu were shocked at the same time. They stared at the branch without blinking. They were the ones involved and had the most profound experience. When the green light of the branch enveloped the sword soul and the saber soul, their hearts shook violently. They felt as if their magic weapons were about to leave them, and the connection between them became weak. Is the tree of life fighting back? Tang Zheng muttered to himself. Originally, he had always thought that although the tree of life was alive and significant, it would not fight back like a human. It would only passively take a beating. Now it seemed that his understanding of the tree of life was still too little. Of course it's fighting back. The inner demons answered his question. The tree of life is a symbol of the big world. In ancient times, the tree of life existed. It was protected by various forces and accepted people's worship. It's just that the tree of life did not show its attacking ability, but everyone knows that the tree of life is not without the ability to protect itself. Tang Zheng suddenly understood. He looked up at the tree of life. The leaves were still rustling and green. It seemed that in the blink of an eye, the tree of life gave him a completely different feeling. The wounds on the tree of life were healing little by little. The juice that flowed out seeped through the surface of the bark. Even the branches and leaves that fell on the ground slowly rose into the air and flew back to the tree. It was as if time was flowing backward. When the return button was pressed, everything was moving backward. Only the green light of the tree of life was particularly dazzling, attracting everyone's attention. Everyone looked at all this in a daze. For a moment, they were at a loss. Tian Chanzi suddenly realized something, and his eyes showed joy. He knew very little about the tree of life. In his era, not many people knew about the tree of life. As for the whereabouts of the tree of life, it was a big secret. Chi Yu's expression became serious. He snorted coldly. With a thought, he actually forcefully summoned back the sword spirit. The sword spirit swayed and trembled as it returned to the war soul sword. Chi Yu's face sank. He had already sensed that the sword spirit was injured. This injury did not come from the Shura, but from the tree of life. Damn it, I actually ignored it. After tens of thousands of years, my memory is not good. Chi Yu said hatefully. The Shura knew nothing about the tree of life. When he also summoned back the sword spirit, he discovered that the sword spirit was injured. He roared at the tree of life with a sinister expression. Although the Shura had a bit of intelligence, he was not much different from a naughty child. He was not as meticulous and shrewd as Chi Yu. However, the Shura was still rational. After seeing the power of the tree of life, he understood that it was not a good thing. Out of the most instinctive reaction, he did not rush forward to fight against the tree of life. Tang Zheng stared blankly at the battle that had ended just like that. He actually felt that it was unreal. Suddenly, a thought popped up from the bottom of his heart. The tree of life was so powerful that it could even calm the battle between the Shura and Chi Yu. Then, how did the tree of life wither and die and then disappear? What kind of power caused all of this? Inner demons, do you know the answer? He could not help but ask. When I was trapped, the tree of life was still alive and well. How could I know? Tang Zheng was a little disappointed and did not ask any more questions. If the tree of life takes action, then it won't be my turn. The five-clawed golden dragon said happily. Tang Zheng was too lazy to pay attention to the five-clawed golden dragon. He stared intently at Chi Yu and the Shura. He did not know what these two were going to do. Chi Yu fiercely glared at the Shura, then unwillingly looked at the tree of life. The green branches stood tall, facing Chi Yu. It was as if the two of them were looking at each other, their invisible auras clashing. Fine, since the tree of life intervened, then I will let you go. In the end, Chiyu helplessly said. The Shura did not answer him. The murderous intent in his eyes was still burning. It seemed that he still wanted to fight with Chiyu for 300 rounds. He must decide the victor. Chiyu saw through the Shura's thoughts and jokingly said, with the tree of life intervening, you can't fight even if you want to. Rest assured, next time I will definitely decide the victor between us. At that time, it will be the time of your death. The Shura coldly snorted, silently rebuking Chiyu. Chiyu then turned to Tangjing. He meaningfully said, Tangjing, you and I are both celestials, and I have also been residing in your body for a period of time. This can also be considered fate. Today, I have taken away a portion of the Heaven-Earth Xian stone, so you will not be able to reconstruct the stairway to heaven. So I will let you go first. It can be considered ending our past fate. You should look forward to seeing me a bit later, because then you will be able to live a bit longer. Tang Zheng had not thought that Chiyu would give up so easily. He had not expected the Tree of Life's interference to be so strong. In the face of Chiyu's threat, Tang Zheng was not the slightest bit afraid. He only regretted that he had come specifically for the Heaven-Earth Xian stone, but in the end, he had not succeeded. He had allowed Chiyu to successfully take away a portion of the Heaven-Earth Xian stone. As long as he was missing a piece of Heaven-Earth Xian stone, he would not be able to reconstruct the stairway to heaven. This was equivalent to his hopes of reconstructing the stairway to heaven being destroyed. He felt very regretful, but there was nothing he could do. He could only glare hatefully at Chiyu. Chiyu was indifferent. He looked deeply at the Tree of Life and said, You actually helped this stinking brat. I will let you understand that your choice was completely wrong. Everyone looked at the Tree of Life in astonishment. They did not know what Chiyu meant by choice. Why did it choose Tangjing? Could it be that it was to protect him? Chiyu did not explain clearly, so they could not ask further. The branches flickered with a green light and swayed with the wind, as if they were silently refuting Chiyu. Chiyu understood the Tree of Life's meaning. His expression became even more unfriendly as he said, Tangjing, you better hide well. In this world, not only me, but those old subordinates of the Yellow Emperor will also not let you go. Those golden crow from before, were you the one who shot it down, right? Tang Zhang's heart skipped a beat. Chiyu did not see it with his own eyes, but he could also guess this point. However, Chiyu's words caused Tang Zhang's heart to sink. He was right. Whether it was Chiyu or the old subordinates of the Yellow Emperor, they would all see him as a thorn in their side. Just how did he get along? How did he offend these two people who were like fire and water at the same time? If he had the chance to go back on his word, would he still do this? He pondered for a moment and gave a negative answer. Chapter 1171. Chiyu flicked his sleeves and left, taking all the demons with him. Tang Jing didn't stop him. It was impossible to completely keep them here, so there was no need to continue to tangle with them. The Shura looked deeply at Chiyu and frowned, but he didn't jump out. The Shura wasn't like before, who only knew how to kill. He now had a trace of intelligence and understood that it would be extremely difficult for him to get rid of Chiyu. Watching the demons leave, the atmosphere was heavy. Tang Jing said in a deep voice, the next time we meet, it will be either you die or I die. Tian Chanzi let out a long sigh of relief and said without any surprise, Chiyu was right about one thing. Right now, you are surrounded by enemies and are making enemies everywhere. This isn't a good thing for you. Tang Jing smiled coldly and said unconcernedly, so what? Although this wasn't my original intention, I don't regret it in the slightest. Tian Chanzi stared at Tang Zhang and understood his intentions. He nodded heavily and didn't say anything else. Suddenly, Tian Chanzi's gaze turned and fell on the Shura. Shwa! The Shura's gaze quickly met with Tian Chanzi's. When their eyes met, it seemed as if there were invisible sparks flying. What about him? Tian Chanzi asked curiously. Tang Jing also subconsciously looked at Qi Yu and said, the Shura is completely different from before. Something must have happened that no one knows about. Tian Chanzi nodded in agreement. The Shura looked at Tang Jing with a complicated expression. He coldly snorted and turned to leave. Stop! Tang Jing hurriedly shouted to stop him. Although the Shura had intelligence, he was still a great killing machine, especially to ordinary people. He was a huge threat. If he was allowed to leave openly, it would definitely lead to chaos and many innocent people would die at his hands. Tang Jing naturally wouldn't sit idly by. Moreover, the Shura was given to him by the Dizang of Goguryeo. If he watched the Shura leave, how would he explain it to the Dizang of Goguryeo? Shura stopped, turned his head, and stared at Tang Jing with an unfriendly expression. Azura's face couldn't be considered handsome to begin with. In fact, it was even somewhat sinister. Therefore, when he glared at Tang Jing with his large eyes, it was especially frightening. Tang Jing faced the Azura without the slightest bit of fear, nor did he have any intention of retreating. You want to stop me? Azura coldly asked. Yes. I can't let you leave, Tang Jing said truthfully. Qi, you have already left. None of you are my match. What ability do you have to keep me here? Azura asked disdainfully. The Shura's language ability had improved a lot compared to before. He actually didn't stutter when speaking, which made Tang Jing's mood even more heavy. Obviously, the Shura's rapid evolution was not necessarily a good thing. I could suppress you in the past. Can't I now? Tang Jing could still feel the strong yin qi and killing intent on the Shura's body, so he was still very confident in the Ksitigarbha Sutra. That was why he was so fearless. The Shura's expression suddenly changed. It was as sinister as a ghost's head. The Shura blade suddenly lit up with a resplendent light. The blade's soul also flew out and circled around the Shura blade, emitting a terrifying and evil power. I don't remember what happened in the past, but if you dare to go against me now, I will definitely make you regret it. The Shura's feelings towards Tang Jing were very complicated. There was an instinctive reverence that seemed to be deep in his bones and could not be removed. However, it was obvious that the opponent's strength was not high. Therefore, the Shura did not know where Tang Jing's confidence came from. As for the words of suppression, the Shura was even more confused. After the Shura's intelligence increased, he could not remember the past. Therefore, he had no impression of the Ksitigarbha Sutra or Tang Jing. Although the Shura was full of confidence, Tang Jing did not shrink back. Instead, he took a step forward and looked at the Shura with a burning gaze. Then you can try. Shwa. The Shura did not say another word. He slashed his blade towards Tang Jing's neck. This slash was strong enough to split stone. If it hit, then Tang Jing would definitely die. There was no way to save the situation. Tian Chanzi's strength was lower than the Shura's, so when he saw this sudden slash, he was so scared that his whole body trembled. He tried to stop it, but it was too late. He could only see the terrifying blade light slash towards Tang Jing. Dodge! Tian Chanzi screamed to remind him. Tang Jing did not move. Perhaps he was confused, but he opened his mouth and a golden Sanskrit character flew out from his mouth. A quiet and peaceful power was emitted from the Sanskrit character. This was the first time Tian Chanzi had seen the effect of the Ksitigarbha Sutra. His whole body trembled as he stared at the Sanskrit character. With his cultivation and experience, he could naturally see that the golden Sanskrit character was extraordinary. It was no wonder that it could suppress the Shura. However, Tian Chanzi and Tang Jing had the same worry. That was, would the golden Sanskrit characters still work? The answer was immediately revealed. Golden Sanskrit characters flew out from Tang Zheng's mouth and flew in front of the Shura. Then, like a giant net, they covered the Shura from head to toe. Hi. The Shura grimaced and stared fiercely at Tang Zheng. He shouted, "What kind of magic is this?" "The Ksitigarbha Sutra," Tang Zheng said decisively. He was surprised that the Shura's memory was blank. He didn't even know the Ksitigarbha Sutra. There's nothing strange about this. The Shura's condition will cause him to forget his past memories. In the past, his intelligence didn't increase. He's like a baby. When he grows up, he won't be able to remember clearly. The inner demon suddenly said. Tang Zheng was slightly stunned. Then he understood. So that's how it is. Then there's nothing to worry about. No wonder the Shura was so fearless. It seems that he didn't know the Ksitigarbha Sutra's restraining effect on him. Then let him have a taste of it. What is the Ksitigarbha Sutra? The Shura didn't know the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Tang Zheng sneered. His confidence increased. He said, "You'll know once you try." Tang Zheng immediately chanted the Ksitigarbha Sutra. In an instant, more and more golden Sanskrit characters appeared. They completely covered the Shura's body like a layer of golden clothing. Ho ho ho, the Shura clearly felt the danger. He started to make a big fuss. His face became more and more sinister. His body moved chaotically as he tried to break free from the Ksitigarbha Sutra's attack. How could Tang Zheng let him do as he wished? He quickly activated the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Golden light shined and dyed the surroundings gold. Even the branches and leaves of the tree of life were not spared. The Shura continuously waved the war spirit sword in his hand. The war spirit sword's power opened up a few cracks on the ground. They were so deep that the bottom couldn't be seen. Waves of cold air seeped out from the cracks. Tang Zheng ignored it. He activated the Ksitigarbha Sutra without any distracting thoughts. The Shura's struggle became weaker and weaker. Put on. The Shura's legs went soft and he knelt on the ground. His sinister face had an additional trace of reverence. He quickly shook his head. Stop chanting. Stop chanting. Tang Zheng finally stopped. He looked at the Shura cautiously and said, "Now you know the power of the Ksitigarbha Sutra." The Shura hurriedly nodded his head. He no longer had the confidence and arrogance from before. He subconsciously understood where the reverence he had for Tang Zheng came from. It was definitely the Ksitigarbha Sutra. It was just that he didn't remember the past. Naturally, he didn't know the origin of the Ksitigarbha Sutra. He subconsciously thought that it was a sacred art created by Tang Zheng. Immediately, he became even more reverent towards Tang Zheng. To be able to create a technique to suppress him, this was definitely not simple. The way he looked at Tang Zheng changed. Many emotions intertwined together. If you listen to me obediently, I won't use the Ksitigarbha Sutra to suppress you. Tang Zheng said. The Shura was about to compromise when he discovered that a light flashed in his mind. A new area in his brain was opened up. He felt that his intelligence had clearly increased. The Shura's eyes widened in surprise. With his not-so-high intelligence, he began to think. Why did his brain suddenly change? Could it be the Ksitigarbha Sutra? He couldn't figure it out no matter how much he thought about it. Suddenly, an idea came to him. His expression became fierce and arrogant. He fiercely glared at Tang Zheng and said, "I won't listen to you. I, the Shura, am indomitable. How could I listen to you?" Tang Zheng frowned. He originally thought that the Shura would calm down a bit after suffering. He didn't expect him to be so arrogant. Then he couldn't be blamed for being ruthless. The Shura was born from the evil Chi of the 9 layers of hell. He had a violent personality. Tang Jing naturally wouldn't show him any mercy. Therefore, with a thought, he immediately chanted the Ksitigarbha Sutra. The golden Sanskrit words blurted out and enveloped the Shura. The Shura screamed. It was extremely terrifying. However, there was a glimmer of light in the depths of his eyes. This was because he felt the changes in his brain. His brain was being developed bit by bit. He guessed right. Although the Ksitigarbha Sutra caused him great pain, it was also extremely beneficial to him. It could actually develop his brain and make him smarter and smarter. He was overjoyed and unconsciously revealed it. Tang Zhang was as thin as a strand of hair. He immediately discovered the Shura's abnormality. Logically speaking, the Shura should be in great pain. However, at this moment, there was a trace of craftiness in his eyes. There was definitely something fishy going on. Seeing Tang Jing stop chanting the Ksitigarbha Sutra, the Shura was greatly disappointed. His face twisted. He then provoked, "Is that all you've got? It's only a so-so." Tang Jing didn't immediately fall for it. He looked at the Shura curiously and asked, "Could it be that you're really not afraid of pain? This bit of pain is only scratching an itch." The Shura snorted. Tang Zheng, however, didn't think much of it and said, "Your ability to lie isn't that great." A trace of panic flashed through the Shura's eyes. This was caught by Tang Zheng. This caused him to become suspicious. His face was ashen as he asked, "Shura, what are you hiding?" The Shura didn't say a word. It was as if he believed that if he didn't speak, there wouldn't be any loopholes. His brain was developed and his intelligence increased. However, he was still too simple. He couldn't be compared to Tang Zheng. Therefore, this childlike reaction exposed him even more. Not only Tang Zheng, but even Tian Chanzi also realized that something was fishy. He stared straight at the Shura and said thoughtfully, "He seems to be deliberately provoking you." Tang Zheng nodded. He also had this feeling. However, what was the Shura's purpose in provoking him? The Ksitigarbha Sutra. Chapter 1172. Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi both thought of the Ksitigarbha Sutra. This was because Shura had been trying to provoke Tang Zheng into reciting the Ksitigarbha Sutra. This abnormal behavior was too eye-catching. Plus or minus pinnacle novel, why do you want me to recite the Ksitigarbha Sutra? Tang Zheng's expression was stern as he asked Azura. Logically speaking, the Azura should be afraid of the Ksitigarbha Sutra. After all, the Ksitigarbha Sutra could suppress him and bring him pain. But he had deliberately provoked him repeatedly. This was too unexpected. Shura panicked as if he had been exposed. He hurriedly said perfunctorily, "What are you talking about? I don't understand." You actually know how to deny it. Your IQ is increasing very quickly." Tian Chanzi said jokingly. IQ? Tang Zhang's head twitched as an idea flashed through his mind. The fact that the Azura had gained intelligence was already very strange. Could it be related to the Ksitigarbha Sutra? The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this was a possibility. The Ksitigarbha Sutra was extraordinary. Perhaps it really did have the effect of opening one's wisdom. Otherwise, why would the Azura spend so much effort to provoke him? Tang Zhang's expression turned serious. He stared at the Azura and asked, "Azura, did you gain intelligence because of the Ksitigarbha Sutra?" Shura's eyes flashed with panic. He looked around and said with a red face, "Nonsense." Seeing the Azura's reaction, Tang Zheng was able to confirm his own guess. his eyes becoming deep and profound as he swept his gaze over the Asura and said, Asura, your words have revealed your true heart. It seems like my guess was not wrong, the Ksitigarbha Sutra has indeed opened up your wisdom. Back then, Dizang of Goguryeo did not mention this, which means that this might be an unexpected surprise. A few images flashed through Shura's mind. It was the image of Dizang of Goguryeo suppressing him. It was deeply etched in his mind. Even though his consciousness was muddled in the past, he could not completely forget it now that he had gained intelligence. Dizang of Goguryeo. Shura's eyes flashed with hatred. Gritting his teeth, he could not wait to challenge Dizang of Goguryeo to a duel. Do you still want to provoke Dizang of Goguryeo? With your strength, you're not his match at all. Tang Zhang said mercilessly. Nonsense, I will definitely defeat him. Shura subconsciously understood how powerful Dizang of Goguryeo was, but he was unwilling to admit it. He roared in exasperation. The more you shout, the more it shows that you are guilty. There is a huge gap between you and Dizang of Goguryeo. There is no comparison at all, Tang Zheng coldly mocked. You. I'm going to kill you. The Shura roared and rushed towards Tang Zheng. Although he had unlocked his intelligence, there was a limit to his shrewdness. If there was a disagreement, he would start a fight. Tang Zheng had no choice but to chant the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Shura knelt on the ground with a plop, holding his head with both hands. He was in great pain, but his eyes revealed joy. Tang Zheng's head trembled. He understood that this was not the way to go. If he continued to use the Ksitigarbha Sutra to suppress the Shura, it would definitely make him smarter. But if he did not use the Ksitigarbha Sutra, he had no other choice. This was a paradox that caused him to be in a dilemma. Come in. In the end, Tang Zheng still had no other choice. He could only activate Sumera Heaven and take Shura in. But he continued to chant the Ksitigarbha Sutra to suppress him. Finally, Shura calmed down and became quiet. Tian Chanzi looked at this scene and said worriedly, although you have temporarily suppressed Shura, you have no choice but to use the Ksitigarbha Sutra. His intelligence is increasing day by day. In the future, you may not be able to suppress him. How could Tang Zheng not know this point? It was just that he had no other choice. He could only bitterly smile. The two looked at each other speechlessly. In the end, Tang Zheng shrugged and said, counter soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir. Right now, he can't make any big waves. Let's just leave it at that for now. Saying this, he raised his head and looked at the tender green branch in the air. He said thoughtfully, Chi-Yu said before that the tree of life chose me. What did that mean? Tian Chanzi heard this and raised his eyebrows. He also said in surprise, this is indeed strange. The tree of life took the initiative to attack and beat back Chi-Yu. This is thought-provoking. Tang Zheng looked at the tree of life in a daze and sighed, yes, before we only thought that it could improve the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Now it seems that it is far more than that. Tian Chanzi looked pensive. He muttered to himself for a long time and said, in my world, there is very little information about the tree of life. There are only a few words left. But everyone knows the importance of the tree of life to this world. As for the whereabouts of the tree of life, almost no one knows. In that case, you also don't know the meaning of Chi-Yu's words. Tang Zheng asked in disappointment. Tian Chanzi smiled bitterly and nodded, I am not a know-it-all. How can I know everything? But since Chi-Yu said so, then he must know. Tang Zheng's head moved and he quickly asked the inner demons, do you know the meaning of Chi-Yu's words? The inner demons hesitated and said, of course I know. This is not some big secret. Then tell me quickly. The inner demons said embarrassedly, that sentence means that the tree of life has its own consciousness and opinions. It chose to help you and stand on your side. Do you understand? Tang Zheng's head was raised and he asked, "You mean the tree of life will choose to stand on my side?" You can think of it that way. Tang Zheng rolled his eyes and looked up at the tree of life in surprise. He was speechless for a long time. Tree of life, why did you choose to stand on my side? I am the weaker side. He muttered to himself. It seemed that he was asking the tree of life, but it also seemed like he was asking himself. But he had no way to find the answer. Because I was born because of you. A voice suddenly sounded in Tang Zheng's mind. Who is it? Tang Zheng turned pale with fright and almost jumped up. Looking around, he did not see a third person. What's going on? Seeing him turn pale with fright, Heaven Monk quickly asked. Tang Zheng looked at Tian Chanzi in a daze and said embarrassedly, "There is an unfamiliar voice in my mind." Unfamiliar voice. Tian Chanzi looked at him suspiciously and listened carefully. But he did not hear a third person's voice. He could not help but look at him in surprise and said, "Could it be that you have been possessed by something?" "You are the one who has been possessed." Tang Zheng said angrily. "It is me." That voice suddenly sounded again. Tang Zheng's heart trembled and his eyes stared blankly. He subconsciously replied, "Who are you?" "The Tree of Life." "What, the Tree of Life?" Tang Zheng's eyes flashed as he stared at the swaying branch. It slowly approached Tang Zheng and finally stopped in front of Tang Zheng. Tian Chanzi also heard Tang Zheng's words and stared at the Tree of Life in disbelief. His eyes were filled with shock. Tang Zheng actually communicated with the Tree of Life. This was unheard of and unseen. Tian Chanzi suddenly turned his head to look at Tang Zheng as if he wanted to see some clues from his reaction. But he found that Tang Zheng also had a sluggish expression and was completely at a loss. "Why can you talk to me?" Tang Zheng asked. "Because it was your blood that awakened me," the Tree of Life said. "My blood?" Tang Zheng was startled. His thoughts drifted back to the past. At that time, he had been trapped under the Dragon Group's base. It was completely dark and he had almost died there. But he had coincidentally encountered the Tree of Life seed. The seed had absorbed his blood and then broke out of the ground. In an instant, it had grown into a towering tree. He had almost forgotten this memory. But after the Tree of Life mentioned it, scenes flashed through his mind like a movie. "Because of my blood, you can communicate with me like this?" Tang Zheng asked curiously. "Yes, I have your blood in my body, so there is no need to speak. We can communicate with each other. As for other people, they can't hear my voice," the Tree of Life explained. Tang Zheng nodded and suddenly understood. He asked, "Chi, you said you chose me. Is it also because of this?" "You and Chi, you are both celestials, but the difference between the two of you is like heaven and earth. I naturally chose you. Then why didn't you communicate with me before? I've always been growing." "Now that my consciousness has finally formed, I can communicate with you freely. Before, I couldn't," patiently explained the Tree of Life. Tang Zheng stared at the Tree of Life. For a moment, all sorts of feelings welled up in his heart. There were thousands of words he wanted to say, but he didn't know where to start. "I know you have many questions. Ask away. As long as I know, I'll definitely tell you." The Tree of Life seemed to understand Tang Zheng's thoughts. Tang Zheng naturally had many questions. Hearing this, he was delighted. Seeing Tang Zheng's reaction, Tian Chanzi couldn't hear the Tree of Life's words. He hastily asked, "What did the Tree of Life say?" "I finally understand why I can communicate with it. Back then, the Tree of Life was able to grow because it absorbed my blood." Tang Jing didn't hide anything. Hearing that, Heaven Monk's eyes gradually lit up, and only after a long while did he sigh. This is your opportunity. If not for your blood, the tree of life would not have been able to grow, and there would not have been anything after that. Perhaps this is the will of the heavens, and there is an arrangement in the dark. Will of the heavens? Tang Jing glanced at the blue sky. He bitterly smiled and shook his head. This was too mysterious. He also didn't understand. It was best to ask the Tree of Life first. Tree of Life, how did you disappear from this world back then? Since you're so powerful, you should have the power to protect yourself, right? Asked Tang Jing solemnly. The branch nodded, indicating it understood Tang Jing's question. Then its voice rang out in Tang Jing's mind. Of course I have the power to protect myself. It's just that the attack I encountered back then was even more powerful. Even if I had the power to protect myself, there was nothing I could do. The Tree of Life said regretfully. In the end, I had to gather all my power and transform it into a seed. I waited for the right time and the right person to break through the soil and grow. What power? Tang Jing was shocked. He was very curious. In this world, anyone who could make the Tree of Life wither and disappear was definitely not something an ordinary person could do. Chapter 1173. Tianchanzi. Tang Jing saw this scene and roared, struggling with all his might. Pinnacle novels. He's not dead. The Tree of Life said, I just don't want another noisy person. Tang Jing heaved a sigh of relief and found that Tianchanzi was indeed still breathing. He stared fiercely at the Tree of Life and asked, We've worked so hard to protect you and even set up the Great Eight Desolation Formation to ensure your safety, but you treat us like this. Is this how you distinguish between kindness and hatred? The branch drooped down slightly, as if it was ashamed, but it quickly raised its head and said, Of course I distinguish between kindness and hatred. You protected me, so I am naturally grateful to you. But you went against me, so how could I turn a blind eye? Then what do you want? Kill me? Tang Jing asked with a sneer. Kill? The Tree of Life's voice was full of doubt. After hesitating for a moment, it denied, Of course I won't kill you. I was born because of you. If I kill you, then wouldn't I be worse than those bad guys in the ghost realm? Tang Jing's head twitched. From the looks of it, the Tree of Life abhorred evil, but its intentions were not bad. Its obsession with the world of spirits and souls was due to its experience in the past. In fact, it was still kind at the bottom of its heart. At least, it had no real malice towards Tang Jing. Tang Jing had an idea and advised, In that case, you are also a kind-hearted person. How can you bear to watch the ghost realm disappear completely? Wouldn't those innocent people of the ghost realm have suffered great injustice because of you? The Tree of Life was at a loss for words. Seeing this, Tang Jing struck while the iron was hot and said, Promise me, let this world stop after it becomes a big world. Let the two worlds depend on each other, wouldn't that be perfect? The Tree of Life's breathing quickened again. Suddenly, Tang Jing felt his entire body loosen. The Tree of Life actually let go of him. The branches rose up high, looking down at Tang Jing condescendingly, and said, Without you, I can still find a way, the energy of the ghost realm, come to me. As soon as he finished speaking, a rumbling sound came from the sky. Tang Jing's head trembled. He had a strange feeling. He quickly looked up at the sky. Above the 9 heavens, in the firmament, a black shadow gradually appeared. Not long after, a large hole appeared. A powerful energy was pouring down from the hole like the water of the 9 heavens, surging and surging, causing people to be unable to breathe. Tang Jing stared at this scene with his mouth agape. The energy that descended from the sky made him feel a sense of fear, because this energy could almost crush him. It was powerful beyond imagination. What is going on? He muttered to himself in a trembling voice. Tian Chanzi had fainted and could not answer his question. The tree of life also remained silent and didn't answer. The green slip of paper soared into the sky like a giant sword piercing through the firmament. In an instant, it reached the 9 heavens. At the same time, many people all over the world felt something strange and looked up at the sky. Many people who were far away could not see the strange phenomenon in the sky. However, many powerhouses sensed something from afar. Chi Yu and the others did not retreat too far. At the edge of the desert, they could clearly see this scene. Everyone stopped. The elites of the Devil clan were stunned and at a loss. Saint King retracted his gaze and looked at Chi Yu with a burning gaze. He asked, "Ancestor, what is going on?" Chi Yu sighed meaningfully. "This day has finally come." "What do you mean?" "This world will completely bid farewell to the small world." Tang Zheng's plan back then was successful. He used the Tree of Life to absorb the energy of the world of spirits and souls and completely turned this world into a big world, thus avoiding destruction, Chi Yu said in a deep voice. "What? It was promoted to a big world?" Saint King was shocked. This was something he had heard of in bits and pieces, but he had never seen it with his own eyes. Now looking at the scene in the sky, a very shocking feeling hit him in the face, causing him to be at a loss for a moment. Chi Yu sighed faintly. Yes, it was promoted to a big world. I have to say, I still admire Tang Zheng for this. Although he is our enemy, he is also a person who cannot be underestimated. He is not worth mentioning compared to you, ancestor, Saint King said flatteringly. Chi Yu raised the corner of his mouth. It was a faint smile, but he did not comment. If the world of spirits and souls is completely reduced to a small world, will they be willing? Won't the world of spirits and souls start a war with our world? Saint King asked in horror. So this is why Tang Zheng is so extraordinary. He has already obtained the consent of the world of spirits and souls. All this will happen naturally and will not cause the problem you are worried about. Do you understand? Chi Yu said meaningfully. How is this possible? The world of spirits and souls is not a softie, why would they let it happen? Saint King was incredulous. He felt that this was simply nonsense. Looking at his doubtful eyes, Chi Yu snorted coldly. He was too lazy to explain more and looked at the sky intently. On Mount Everest, a group of people was searching for the soul of the golden crow scattered everywhere. Suddenly, one of them raised his head and looked into the distance. Then, another person also raised his head and looked into the distance. Suddenly, everyone stopped what they were doing and stopped to look into the distance. They looked at each other and their expressions became complicated. What is going on? Lu Wuxin asked in a deep voice. Many people shook their heads because they knew. Mo Xie's eyes were deep and unfathomable. He stared into the distance. It was too far away. Even if his cultivation was superb, he could not see, but he could feel the aura. The terrible energy that could almost destroy the world fell from the sky, causing his heart to sink to the bottom. There seems to be energy from the outside world entering this world. Mo Xie said thoughtfully. Energy from the outside world entering. Lu Wuxin's eyes widened in surprise, not understanding what this sentence meant. They did not know that Tang Zheng used the Tree of Life to absorb the energy of the world of spirits and souls. Otherwise, they would have guessed this point. What should we do? Lu Wuxin asked helplessly. The two of them were speechless and could not figure out the reason. Since their reunion, Mo Xie's leadership position had gradually been established. Although Lu Wuxin was very strong and arrogant, she had to admit that she was still not comparable to Mo Xie. I'll go take a look. Mosia said, eager to move. Lu Wuxin wanted to say that he would go as well, but he swallowed his words. Collecting the souls of the golden crows was the most important thing, and they could not afford to waste any time. Because the enemy was in full swing, and they did not have much time left. Okay, then I'll stay. You must be careful. Lu Wuxin reminded. Mo Xia nodded and soared into the sky. Like a gust of wind, she blew into the distant sky. At the same time, the animals between heaven and earth became anxious. In the zoo, the roars of many animals sounded. The monkeys on the rockery jumped up and down, becoming irritable and restless. The tiger in the cage kept scratching the iron dragon with its claws. It opened its bloody mouth and roared at the tourists, scaring them into screaming and retreating. The python stood up high, spitting out its scarlet tongue. Its pair of eyes emitted a terrifying gaze. Screams were heard everywhere in the zoo. Not only these animals, but almost all the people and animals seemed to have gone crazy, trying to break out of the cage. The tourists fled in panic. In the streets and alleys, there was a rustling sound from the sewers. After a while, huge rats crawled out one by one. They did not seem to be afraid of humans at all. They crawled quickly on the streets with panic in their eyes. The pedestrians were frightened and screamed, jumping up and down. A series of strange scenes played out in China, attracting the attention of many people and causing a lot of panic. In a secret military base in the western suburbs of the capital, Ji Wuxiang was training soldiers and practicing celestial chess. During this period, he had made rapid progress. Soldiers were indeed the best people. They followed orders meticulously, allowing him to make rapid progress. He believed that it would not be long before he could complete celestial chess. At that time, not only would the capital be covered by celestial chess, but the vast world and the vast land of China would be covered by celestial chess. Then, the plan that he had been planning for a long time would come to fruition. He was going to become an unprecedented person. Thinking of this, he was very excited. As for the changes in the outside world, he had heard a little about it, but he chose to ignore it for the time being. Although Qiyu was resurrected, the Yellow Emperor's former subordinates rose, and the ancient figures in myths and legends reappeared in the world. He believed that as long as he completed celestial chess, these ancient people would not be able to make big waves. He had absolute confidence in his celestial chess. Without any warning, he stopped giving orders, and the tens of thousands of soldiers stopped their movements in unison, looking at him with strange expressions. He raised his head high, frowning as he looked at the distant sky, as if something was firmly attracting him. Granny Li had been following Ji Wuxiang all this time. After noticing his strange behavior, she also frowned and thoughtfully asked, "Lord, I seem to have sensed something." Ji Wuxiang's expression was solemn as he nodded and said, "Your feeling is correct. There is indeed a powerful energy coming from the northwest. This energy can almost destroy the world, making people feel very uneasy. Energy that can destroy the world." Granny Li was shocked, her face somewhat pale. Ever since the Li Palace changed hands, the people around her had either died or left. Granny Li had long since lost her former prestige, and there was a trace of melancholy between her brows. Ji Wuxiang sighed, "Yes, the strength of this energy is extraordinary. If I'm not wrong, this must be the tree of life at work. What is the tree of life doing?" Ji Wuxiang pondered for a while, then said with a myriad of emotions, "It's transforming the world, making it completely advance to a large world." He actually knew what Tang Zheng was doing. It had to be said that he was really too powerful. What is a large world? Although Granny Li was the commander of the Li Palace, she still did not know about the large and small worlds. She could not help but look at Ji Wuxiang in confusion. "You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.